Chapter 1345. The hearts of the 600,000 berserkers trembled. Su Ming's voice echoed in their ears, and their blood boiled furiously. They watched as Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at the setting sun in the sky. They also saw Su Ming's right hand slowly rising into the air. During that instant, the setting sun in the distance seemed to shudder, as if it was forced to submit to Su Ming's will. It gradually rose from its originally still state, and gradually the setting sun turned into the crimson sun in the afternoon sky. This scene caused all the berserkers to be dumbfounded. In the midst of the shock in their hearts, an indescribable excitement rose within them. Their fanaticism towards Su Ming also reached its peak, because they saw just how powerful the god of berserkers was. It was especially so for those who had never seen Su Ming before. They had lived in the legends of the god of berserkers for the past 1,000-something years. The god of berserkers in the legends was powerful, and he was like the god of berserkers in the world. This legend had already been deeply branded into all the berserkers' minds. No one doubted it, especially when Su Ming's actions at that moment. He had turned the legend into a brand, causing all the berserkers' breathing to quicken. As excitement appeared on their faces, they knew that the legend was real. In fact, the god of berserkers before them was much stronger than the legends made him out to be. So what if he could move mountains and drain oceans? So what if he could summon rain and overturn clouds? So what if he could pluck the stars and moon? What Su Ming was doing at that moment surpassed the limits of what these words could describe. He was reversing the sun and changing the laws of the world, making the sun that should have set rise in reverse and turn into a blazing sun. This was not difficult for Su Ming, and there was no need for him to do it either. However, Su Ming still wanted all the berserkers to see this, because this was even more real than him saying 10,000 things about making the berserkers rise to power. He compared the sun to the berserkers so that all the berserkers could see it rise to power. Because of it, he could leave behind a powerful brand in their hearts. This brand could make all the berserkers gather under a single thought, and that thought was to make the berserkers rise to power. It was the same as how second senior brother, Manya, and the other old men had pushed Fong Tsonglan to be the berserker consort in the past, making her the spiritual symbol of the berserkers for 1,000-something years. Su Ming was using his own method to instantly turn the spiritual symbol of the berserkers into a corporeal power that could shake the universe. At the same time, when the sun in the sky rose up once again with Su Ming's finger, all the berserkers' excited cheers rang out in all directions and reverberated through the entire world. God of berserkers! God of berserkers! God of berserkers! As the voices echoed in the air, the power of the laws of fate spreading out from all the berserkers reached a monstrous degree. It obscured the entire world and swept towards Su Ming. Almost at the same time the sun in the sky rose up, 3 enraged wills appeared in the depths of Death vortex beyond the berserkers' world. They had not completely woken up and were still a little shaky, but without any hesitation, they spread out and charged towards the berserkers' world, which was one of the many dimensions in Death vortex. These 3 wills were the ancient wills that had forced Su Ming to go to Divine Essence Star Ocean in the past. They had existed for an unknown number of years, and they were ancient and decaying. What rushed out at that moment was not their original will, but their divine clones. It was not that they were underestimating Su Ming, but that every single time they fell into deep sleep, they would need a long time before they could completely wake up. Right then, only a portion of them had woken up, but they had already placed a great deal of importance on Su Ming's appearance, and they had already begun the process of continuously waking up. However, if they wanted to wake up completely, they would need time. Unless an enemy from the outside approached them, then they would immediately wake up under the stimulation. Otherwise, they would need some time before they could completely wake up. The divine clones from the 3 wills instantly found the entrance to the land of berserkers. Without any hesitation, they surged in with a bang, but the instant they were about to descend on the land of berserkers, Su Ming lifted his head and let out a cold harumph. That cold harumph immediately stirred up the power of the laws of fate in the Berserker's world that was equivalent to 160 million something laws of fate in the world outside. This power of fate spread out in an invisible manner and turned into layers of ripples that could not be seen. With booming sounds that no one could hear, they charged towards the three wills. As the ripples spread out, the three wills were completely shocked. They didn't care about the ripples of the laws of fate, but the wills that existed within the ripples were filled with shocking pressure. As soon as they made contact with the ripples, the entire sky went dark. The three wills were instantly scattered. Since their original wills were still in the process of waking up, the three divine clones did not have much intelligence in them. They only had their instincts. At that moment, when they were scattered, they instinctively fused together and split into three parts. The first part charged into space. Once it stepped into the death vortex through the entrance to the land of Berserkers, it let out a roar that spread through most of the dimensions in death vortex. At the instant the roar rang out, more than 100 dimensions in death vortex responded to it. A large number of strange living beings swiftly rushed out from these dimensions and charged towards the Berserker's world based on the orders of the ancient will in the direction of the roar. The second part charged towards the Dead Sea in the Berserker's world. At the instant it fused into the Dead Sea, it split into millions of parts and seeped into each of the sea beasts. In an instant, all the sea beasts in the Dead Sea trembled and let out roars that caused the entire Dead Sea to roar. As they roared, the Dead Sea churned violently. It was as if the entire sea was boiling. One after another, sea beasts rushed out and roared at the sky. Their eyes were bloodshot, and there was madness in their expressions. The sea giants roared, and the sea dragons' bodies contorted. It was as if they were enduring a great deal of pain. This pain could only be vented through slaughter. As for the third part, it did not fly into the sky, and neither did it enter the sea. It was formed by the fusion of the three great wills, and it was the one with the greatest number of wills. It could be said that even if the other two were fused together, they could not compare to it. He gathered together to form a figure. He was dressed in a black robe, and his body was formed by fog. His eyes shone with an aloof red glare, and he was glaring at Su Ming from midair. "You shouldn't have returned." A hoarse voice that sounded like it was rubbing against the fog came from the black-robed figure. Since most of the three divine clones had fused together, the figure possessed some intelligence and memories. At that moment, when he spoke, the entire land of Berserkers was enveloped in a dark and cold air. An endless, mighty pressure descended, causing even the suns rising to freeze. A hint of derision appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. He swung his right hand, and with it, the rising sun in the sky let out a bang and crushed all the mighty pressure on it. It instantly rose into the sky, and when it reached the spot where the proud sun was, the light spreading out from it was the light of dawn. This light of dawn reached 100,000 feet, and it meant that the Berserkers would definitely rise to power. It also meant that all the power of darkness would be chased away when the Berserkers stood in the way of their rise. The Dead Sea tumbled about, and its roars shook the sky. Huge waves that were thousands of feet tall were stirred up, as if the entire sea had turned into a life form that was roaring at that moment. Countless sea beasts roared with bloodshot eyes on the surface of the sea. If anyone cast their gaze over, they would find that the sea beasts were like a tidal wave on the boundless sea. Before Su Ming returned, this would have definitely been a disaster for the entire land of Berserkers. Perhaps the Berserkers would be able to get through this disaster, but they would definitely have to pay an incredibly devastating price. In the past, the beast swarm was only a third of its current size. This was the strongest beast swarm from the Dead Sea over the past 1,000-something years in the history of the Berserkers. It was foreseeable that countless islands would be submerged. Perhaps some of them would reappear, but some of them would turn into eternity as they were submerged, and the children and elderly would die in an incredibly devastating manner. But all of this was before Su Ming returned. Right then, as derision appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips, His faint words traveled into the ears of the 600,000 anxious cultivators around him. The power of fireflies. When Su Ming spoke, he lifted his left hand and pushed down swiftly at the Dead Sea beneath him. With it, all the laws of fate in the world of berserkers gathered on the Dead Sea. A huge palm manifested, and once it appeared, it immediately swelled up madly. There was no end to it, and its size was difficult to describe with words. No one in the area could see just how big it was. They were so shocked by this scene that their minds went blank. However, if anyone looked down from the highest spot in the land of berserkers where they could see the entire situation, they would be able to see that the palm that appeared above the berserkers' Dead Sea was the size of the entire land of berserkers. That palm was formed by Su Ming's will of heaven. It was the power of the laws of fate in the land of berserkers, and it was Su Ming's will as an antecedental spirit. It was also the god of berserkers' palm that protected the land of berserkers. The palm lines were like mountain ridges, and the Venus pathways were like rivers. When it pressed down with a bang, the roaring sea dragons let out shrill screams of pain. Their bodies instantly shattered. The roaring sea giants tried to fight back, but their bodies were forced to crumble and explode. They were reduced to a bloody mess, and blood gushed into the air. The black seawater was filled with the will of blood, and it turned a faint shade of purple. There were also other sea beasts, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1,000,000, and even 10 million of them crumbled with shrill roars when the gigantic palm pressed down, causing the Dead Sea to turn into a purple sea. It was so weak that it could not even withstand a single blow. The purple hue in the purple sea was the color that was formed after the original black fused with a large amount of blood. There was a strange and evil air to it, and it made the sky look as if it had been refracted. At that moment, the entire world instantly fell silent. The second update is here. There's still a third update, but it'll be a little later. Please get monthly votes. Chapter 1346. His murderous aura shook the heavens. As the 10 million sea beasts died, the murderous aura around Su Ming's body became much thicker. It made him appear incredibly cold and sinister, and it also allowed the 600,000 berserkers in the area to see his callous side. Manya, Chile Tian, and the other old men who had once followed Su Ming to chase away the immortals had seen the cold-blooded side of Su Ming's personality before, but this was the first time the berserkers had seen the brutality of the god of berserkers. As their hearts trembled and their hearts trembled, they saw with their own eyes how cold-blooded their god of berserkers was when he dealt with his enemies. This scene shocked all of them, and it turned into an eternal brand in their hearts. At the same time, as the sea beast died and the Dead Sea turned purple, the huge palm did not stop. It pressed down on the surface of the Dead Sea and sank down. As the seawater trembled, it started dispersing. Su Ming wanted to destroy all traces of the sea beasts, including the baby beasts in the Dead Sea and all the environment that could provide them a place to live. He wanted to crush them all. A large amount of seawater dissipated, and a large amount of purple aura and red aura rose from it. After the span of a few breaths, a shocking boom reverberated in the air, and the huge palm disappeared. With it, there was no longer a sea in the land of berserkers. The submerged continents in the land of berserkers were revealed, the ruins of Great Yu Imperial Palace and the Tower of Barren Lands of Inheritance. At that moment, the sound of something tearing apart rang out in the sky. Piercing howls also reverberated in the air. In an instant, blurry figures appeared in the sky. Those figures were the ferocious beasts that had been summoned from the other worlds in Een Death Vortex. Among them was the two-headed creature Su Ming had seen previously, along with other living beings of various appearances. All of them were closing in on him with killing intent. A large number of them appeared, and just as they were about to descend like a storm, Su Ming let out a cold harumph and swung his arm. Immediately, a large amount of purple smoke and blood aura that had risen from the Dead Sea that filled the world of berserkers charged into the sky as Su Ming swung his arm. Seal. With just one word, the purple aura spun in the air and turned into a gigantic ring. The red aura immediately distorted and turned into various complicated runic symbols and Venus pathways that charged into the sky. At the instant the ferocious beasts from the world outside rushed down, they branded themselves in the sky. The area of the seal was incredibly large, and it covered the entire sky of the Berserker's world. Once the seal was formed, booming sounds surged into the sky, and all the ferocious spirits in the world outside could not break through it. All of them were blocked outside the Berserker's world. Everything that tried to break through the seal let out miserable shrieks as soon as they touched it. Their bodies withered rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, they vanished into thin air. With one palm and one seal, there were no longer any existences in the world that could pose a threat to the Berserkers. Su Ming did it in a relaxed manner, and his gaze fell on the black-robed figure in the fog, who had been intimidated by all of this. "You are just a mere divine clone. You are still not my opponent." Su Ming cast an indifferent glance at the black-robed figure in the fog and took a step forward. At the instant he did so, the black-robed figure retreated swiftly. With what little intelligence he had left, he could clearly sense the danger from Su Ming. It was a terrifying presence that could wipe him off the face of the earth. Yet at the instant he retreated, Su Ming did not stir up any ripples of power around him. The air did not distort, and without a single sound, he appeared beside the black-robed figure, who had not noticed him in advance. He lifted his right hand and struck. Boom! The black-robed figure in the fog was torn to shreds and turned into a large amount of fog that tumbled backwards. Once it was 10,000 feet away, it gathered together and took form once more. Its red eyes were fixed on Su Ming, and great wariness appeared in them. "If you want to kill me, then you will have to possess a will that surpasses my original will, or else you will not be able to harm even a single hair of mine. Su Ming, you are indeed very strong, but if you want to kill me, you are still not strong enough." The black-robed figure's words might still be hoarse, but they were much more nimble than before. Clearly, the awakening of the three great wills was nearing its end. Su Ming did not know any of this, and even if he did, he would not care about it. He had returned to the land of Berserkers with the intention of causing a ruckus and finding out many secrets. With a cold sneer on his lips, he took a step forward again. At that moment, the black-robed figure in the fog lifted his hands and formed a seal before pushing them forward. When he did so, his voice echoed in the air. "Water of the east, metal of the west, fire of the north, wood of the south, earth of the east." The black-robed figure in the fog spoke quickly. At the instant he said those 5 sentences, 5 gusts of fog appeared in front of him. As they distorted, they took the shapes of a sword, a water bottle, a wooden thong, a spark, and a black soil. As they surrounded him, they seemed to have fused together to turn into a circular screen of light that looked like a rune. In an instant, it charged towards Su Ming. As it moved forward, the screen of light grew larger. In the blink of an eye, it was already 10,000 feet wide, as if it wanted to suppress Su Ming. Su Ming's expression remained the same. Not a single hint of change could be detected on him. At the instant the 5 elemental rune closed in on him, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of air. A ray of purple light instantly flew out and turned into a purple wooden sword in front of him. At the instant the wooden sword appeared, it let out a hum and circled around Su Ming's body for a punch. The sword whistled loudly, and in an instant, it charged towards the incoming invisible rune. The blade of the sword slashed down. A crescent moon of purple light shot out. At the instant it crashed into the 5 elemental rune. The rune immediately fused together. In the blink of an eye, it completely disappeared under the sword glare. This scene caused the black-robed figure in the fog to suck in a sharp breath. His eyes sparkled, and without any hesitation, he turned into a long arc and retreated. "What is this sword? It's a little familiar. I can't remember clearly. If my original form wakes up, I'll be able to recognize it. I don't have a lot of memories." At the instant the black-robed figure in the fog retreated, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at him. The purple wooden sword let out a hum and disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already around the black-robed figure. When it swept past him, the figure let out a roar of despair. "This is just my divine clone. I'm about to wake up. Su Ming, when I wake up, you will regret coming back. I'll be waiting." When Su Ming said those words flatly, the shrill roar came to an abrupt halt. The purple wooden sword circled around him once, and the black figure disappeared without a trace. The end of Will's sword was one of the 9 sacred vessels of Great Abyss tribe, and it had been preserved in an incredibly good condition. Su Ming had only used 3/10 of its power previously. The third update will continue tomorrow. Monthly votes aren't good enough. I beg for monthly votes. Chapter 1347. There are 8,000 words in the third chapter. It's not that I can't write the last 1,000 words. It's just that I need to ponder over the subsequent plot, so I don't dare to write it down. I'll break out tomorrow, and it'll be the full 9,000 words. I'm even planning to break out on Monday. I just hope that the monthly votes are good. Chapter 1348. The sun rose in the sky above the Berserker's world. The gazes of the 600,000 Berserkers gathered on Su Ming's body. They had seen him kill all the sea beasts and vaporize the Dead Sea with just a lift of his arm. They had also seen Su Ming seal the universe with a swing of his arm, causing the ferocious beasts in the world beyond to be unable to take even half a step in. If this was still secondary, then they had also witnessed the matchless momentum of Su Ming cutting down their wills with one slash. Even though there were plenty of Berserkers who did not know who the 3 divine clones of the Berserker's wills were, Tamanya, Wu Shuang, and the others, they were a group of people who had somewhat figured out the secrets of the Berserker's world. It was precisely because they knew that the countless worlds in Death Vortex were ruled by 3 ancient wills, which is why the shock in their hearts at that moment was much greater than that of the other Berserkers. There were 3 wills that had existed since ancient times. They were the wills of heaven that could not be defied. In the past, Su Ming had been unable to fight against them and could only leave the barren lands of divine essence. His eldest senior brother, second senior brother, and Huzi had also been unable to fight against them. They could only leave the place and had their brands left behind. In fact, even the first god of Berserkers, Lishan Xiao, was somewhat controlled by the 3 great wills. The Berserkers' growth and changes over the countless years had their shadows behind them. This was just the Berserkers' world. It was just one of the worlds in the gigantic Death Vortex. It could be imagined that there were plenty of other dimensions in Death Vortex that were controlled by the 3 great wills to decide the fates of countless living beings. Yet even though it was just a divine clone that had descended upon the realm of gods, it had still been shattered by Su Ming with a casual swing of his sword. This scene caused the breathing of Manya, Wu Shuang, and the others to practically stop. Fang Canglan looked at Su Ming in the sky with a smile. She did not know how strong he was, but she did not care about it. She had been the symbol of the Berserker spirit for 1,000-something years, and she had hoped from the bottom of her heart that the Berserkers would rise to power. After waiting for 1,000-something years, Su Ming had returned, and she knew that the day had arrived, just as he had said. There was no longer the ocean of death on the ground. Instead, there was only a depression, and no corpses could be seen. This was because all the corpses of the sea beasts had been shattered and turned into nothingness. The earthen yellow ring could no longer be seen in the sky. Instead, it was covered by a purple formation with a hint of red light. It was densely packed like a spider's web, sealing the sky tightly. Through the seal, one could see a large number of evil spirits in the outside world. They all looked different, and they were trying to break the seal and charge in. However, when their power landed on the seal, it did not cause any ripples. Is it about to arrive? Su Ming mumbled to himself faintly. His gaze landed on the sky, and a fierce look appeared in his eyes. It was just as he had said. He was waiting for the true descent of the 3 wills. Only when their true wills descended would Su Ming be able to truly end the lives of the three great wills. Su Ming had been waiting for this day for a long time, and he did not mind waiting a little longer. It did not matter whether it was the fact that he was forced to leave in the past, the plot against him in the illusion in the fifth ocean of Divine Essence Ocean, or the brands left behind by his eldest senior brothers and the others. All of these gave Su Ming no reason not to kill them. Before this, he had been slightly worried. After all, the brands left behind by his eldest senior brothers and the others were definitely extraordinary. Once he killed the three great wills, there was a high possibility that he would be implicated, but once he possessed true Morning Tao world, he had a true world clone, and he became an antecedental spirit of a true world. Su Ming was confident that his eldest senior brothers and the others in his true world would be protected by him. Because of it, the three great wills would lose their ability to activate the brands on his eldest senior brothers and the others before they died. Su Ming waited. His expression was calm. His gaze landed on the land without any seawater from the sky. His gaze could not cover the entire land, but with just one sweep of his divine sense, he could easily picture the land and the Berserker's world in his mind. He saw the frozen Great Yu Imperial Palace buried in the depths of the sea. The ice had not melted by then. As he stared at the once familiar place, Su Ming also saw the living beings sealed in ice. At that moment, he could clearly tell that they were members of other tribes from the era of antecedental spirits. Perhaps there were tribes from Shu and Wu among them, and Great Yu Imperial Palace was clearly not built by the first god of Berserkers. It was an illusion created by the elder of Great Berserker Tribe when Great Berserker Tribe was still around. Su Ming had seen it clearly when he returned to the ancient past while he was in the world in All Spirits Hall. In the end, his gaze landed on a towering platform in the ruins of Great Yu Imperial Palace. He had been there before, and when he returned to the ancient past, he had also seen it. Some of his guesses had long since been verified. "You can't see the world I see. You can't see hope," Su Ming mumbled softly. The elder of Great Berserker Tribe from the ancient past, the legendary Great Yu's elder in the land of Berserkers, and the blind sun maker who told him that Berserker's Realm Mountain was in his heart. These figures gradually overlapped with each other, but Su Ming had a feeling that something was missing. Then, a familiar, kindly presence appeared among the overlapping figures. Su Ming sighed softly. He had long since come to an understanding. At the instant Su Ming sighed, he suddenly let out a soft gasp of surprise. He sensed two signs of life in Great Yu Imperial Palace with his divine sense. One of them was a huge dark turtle. It was lying quietly in a corner at that moment. In the face of Su Ming's divine sense, hesitation appeared on its face, as if it had sensed a hint of familiarity, but there was more of a sense of unfamiliarity. It did not dare to appear. "It's this." Su Ming smiled faintly. He placed the focus of his divine sense on the second sign of life. It existed in the depths of Great Yu Imperial Palace. Almost at the instant Su Ming swept his divine sense outwards, a crazed roar traveled forth, as if it had turned into a wave of impact that charged towards Su Ming's divine sense. As soundless booms reverberated in the air, Su Ming's divine sense started distorting under the crazed ripples. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. When he first investigated Great Yu Imperial Palace in the past, he had sensed this crazed will within it. Even though he had made some deductions when he summoned Great Yu Imperial Palace later on, by the looks of it, those deductions were not correct. This crazed will was definitely not something that a life could possess. It was more like the soul of an enchanted vessel. The soul of an enchanted vessel. In pensive silence, Su Ming shifted his divine sense away and landed on another spot on the Berserker's Dead Sea. There was a tower there. It might have towered into the sky, but it was still submerged by the Dead Sea. This was Ancient Wasteland's tower, and also the god of Berserkers' tower. It was a tower formed by the first god of Berserkers, Lai Shanxiu. In the past, with Su Ming's level of cultivation, he had not been able to step into the top level, which was why he had not been able to find the clues leading to the Berserker's sacred vessel, the Barren Cauldron, at the top level of the tower. Yet now, This tower looked as if it was transparent in Su Ming's eyes. He could clearly see a cauldron the size of a fist floating in the layers of seals and seals at the top level of the tower. It was exuding waves of a savage presence. There was a simple and ancient air to that cauldron, as if it had existed for an unknown number of years. As he stared at the small cauldron in Ancient Wasteland's tower, Su Ming sensed it quietly. After a long while, he was certain that this item was not Great Berserker Tribe's sacred vessel, but an imitation. Yet, even though it was an imitation, due to the accumulation of time, this item still contained some of the Baron Cauldron's power. However, it was just a cauldron. There was no soul within it. When Su Ming saw this, he came to an understanding. What was sealed in Great Yu Imperial Palace was the soul of an enchanted vessel. That soul was highly likely to be the soul of Great Berserker Tribe's sacred vessel. Perhaps it was not all of it, but it was definitely a part of it. The cauldron was an imitation, but if it fused with the soul, then this item could also be known as Great Berserker Tribe's sacred vessel. However, compared to the true sacred vessel of Great Berserker Tribe from the era of antecedent spirits, it was much weaker. This is the secret hidden in the Berserker's world, but it is just one of the many secrets in Yin Death Vortex. Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed in the direction of Ancient Wasteland's tower. With it, his divine thought gathered around Ancient Wasteland's tower from all directions with a bang. Once it surged into the tower, loud booming sounds immediately spread through the area. The seals in the tower were instantly broken by Su Ming's divine thought with an unstoppable force. Layer by layer, in just the span of a few breaths, he reached the top. The seals there were rather complicated, but with Su Ming's level of cultivation, he only needed to crush them forcefully if he wanted to break them. However, at the instant his divine thought closed in, all the seals and seals at the top of Ancient Wasteland's tower seemed to have noticed Su Ming's god of Berserker's will and disappeared on their own, as if they were being forced back on their own. This caused Su Ming's gaze to focus. His divine thought instantly surged into the top of Ancient Wasteland's tower and swept up the floating palm-sized cauldron before it disappeared from the tower. At the same time, Su Ming lifted his right hand. The air on his palm distorted, and the small cauldron appeared. It was bronze in color, and it had an ancient presence to it, as well as the presence of time. At that moment, it floated above Su Ming's palm without moving, but there was a heavy feeling coming from it. As he looked at the cauldron, Su Ming remained silent for a while before he swung his left arm and seized the air in the direction of Great Yu Palace. With it, Great Yu Palace trembled, and booming sounds reverberated in the air. Cracking sounds also rang out, and in an instant, as if some seal had been broken, a crazed will rushed out from within. That will had no form, but when Su Ming looked at it with his divine thought, he could see a gigantic figure. That figure was 100 feet tall and incredibly built. His hair was a mess, and he held a long spear in his hand. When he rushed out, he roared at the sky, causing the world to distort and space to turn into ripples. However, most of his body was indistinct and incomplete. As he roared, the figure turned his head around and glared in Su Ming's direction, as if he was looking into Su Ming's eyes through an endless distance. Roar! The figure roared again, and with a single move, he disappeared in an instant. Only Su Ming could see that the figure had turned into an impact formed by a will and was swiftly closing in on him. Chapter 1349. He was so quick that he instantly appeared in front of Su Ming. In a scene that no one could see, that person charged toward the center of Su Ming's brows like an arrow. A thick wave of killing intent closed in on him, and it was so strong that it made it seem as if the world was being burned by invisible flames. Su Ming watched it coldly and did not move. At the instant the sharp arrow was less than 30 feet away from him, a freezing glint suddenly shone in Su Ming's eyes. Immediately, his blood roared, and the power of the god of berserkers erupted from his body. His berserker soul, berserker bones, and all the presence of the god of berserkers spread out with incredible intensity. At the same time, the 100 million something souls of great Berserker tribe spread out from Su Ming's body and surrounded him. They swam about and worshipped him. At that moment, Su Ming might not have activated the god of Berserker's transformation, but everything about him was that of the god of Berserkers. It was the pure blood of great Berserker tribe and the pure soul of great Berserker tribe. At the instant it spread out, the figure charging towards Su Ming shuddered. When Su Ming released the presence of the god of Berserkers without holding anything back, and the souls of great Berserkers filled the area, the figure trembled and stopped 10 feet away from Su Ming. It stared at Su Ming deeply, and its killing intent disappeared. Slowly, it knelt down to worship Su Ming. When it completely knelt down before him, Su Ming's presence as the god of Berserkers roared once more. A great power of the laws of fate that shocked even Su Ming spread out from the figure's body and charged towards him. It instantly fused into his body, causing his soul to become much stronger. Greetings, antecedental spirit of great Berserker tribe's 9th clan leader. A hoarse, buzzing voice slowly came out of the figure's mouth. The voice was shaky, as if it hadn't spoken for a long time. After speaking, the figure lowered its head and stopped moving. The elder Berserker said that if the secondary cauldron does not appear, I will seal it. If the secondary cauldron appears, then the person with the fate of great Berserker tribe will descend. If this person is not an antecedental spirit of Berserker tribe, then the cauldron will shatter and I will die. But if he is an antecedental spirit of great Berserker tribe, I beseech this old man to return to my position. The figure cowed out. His voice was still muffled and hoarse, but the last few words seemed to be filled with determination. Su Ming looked at the figure that no one else could see, then cast his gaze on the small cauldron in his right hand. A contemplative look appeared on his face, and after a long while, he nodded. Allow me to return. At the instant Su Ming said those 4 words, the figure lifted its head and leaped forward to charge towards the small cauldron in Su Ming's right hand. Su Ming did not stop it. He simply allowed the figure to get close. The small cauldron seemed to have turned into a black hole that could absorb everything, and in an instant, it illuminated the entire world of Berserkers and all the Berserkers. Once it fused with the figure, a wisp of aura spread out from the small cauldron and crawled into Su Ming's right hand. Once it swam through his body, it seemed to be outlining Su Ming's veins. It searched for the veins in his cultivation base and connected them together to form a picture. Then, it returned to the small cauldron, and a piercing light erupted from it. It shone 100,000 feet brightly, and from the distance, it looked like a blazing sun. Its light shone in all directions, and during that instant, it illuminated the entire land of Berserkers and all the Berserkers' cultivators. There were countless pictures that were exactly the same as Su Ming's, and all of them had the figure of a person formed by the veins. They were the veins in Su Ming's body. The pictures fused with the light, and when they landed on all the Berserkers, they forcefully entered their bodies. The expressions of all the Berserkers who were illuminated by the light immediately changed. Crazed delight appeared on their faces, and almost all of them sat down cross-legged to circulate their cultivation bases, because they noticed that a spot in their blood that they usually did not know about had been opened up in the light. It was as if a seal in the inherited blood of all Berserkers had been broken at that instant. Once the seal was broken, a vast amount of power erupted from their bodies. The rapid rise in their cultivation bases caused all the Berserkers to have a deep understanding of how powerful they were. Awakening, bone sacrifice, great completion in the Berserker soul realm, man cultivation realm, earth cultivation realm, heaven cultivation realm, world plane realm, earth culpa realm, moon culpa realm, solar culpa realm, mastery realm, fate realm, life realm, death realm, Avacania realm. The dozen-something realms were all branded in the Berserkers' bodies at that instant. Their veins and Venus pathways were all changed. These realms were what Su Ming had experienced and walked through in his life. In fact, it could be said that it was a path of cultivation he had created by fusing with the cultivators in the world outside. It was as if Su Ming had chosen this path out of all the other paths. At that moment, with the release of the small cauldron, it was branded in all the berserkers' hearts and blood. It was also divided into 3 steps. The first step was awakening to Berserker Soul Realm. The second step was from Man Cultivation Realm to World Realm and Lunar Culpa Realm and Solar Culpa Realm as the transition. The third step was to become a master of fate, lives, and death, and then become an antecedental spirit in Avacania Realm. This meant that he had already surpassed the third step and was moving towards the fourth step. The complete cultivation system and the path of cultivation Su Ming had experienced himself became the future path of cultivation for great Berserker tribe who had lost their cultivation system. Since they had a sufficient amount of power and foundation, and since they did not have a direction for training, they had accumulated enough power. That was why the branding of the system immediately allowed all the Berserkers' levels of cultivation to increase by leaps and bounds. Even the weakest among the 600,000 cultivators in the area was in the later stage of the Transcendence Realm, because only those in the later stage of the Transcendence Realm could fly for a long period of time and reach this place from all directions. The Berserkers in the later stage of the Transcendence Realm had their levels of cultivation explode, and they reached Bone Sacrifice Realm, then Berserkers in the Berserker Soul Realm. As for the Berserkers who were originally in the Bone Sacrifice Realm, they moved straight past the Berserker Soul Realm and became cultivators in Man Cultivation Realm. In fact, some of the more outstanding ones among them even leaped forward and became cultivators in Earth Cultivation Realm, reaching the level of cultivation Su Ming had when he left. The ones who had the greatest change were the Berserkers who were in the Berserker Soul Realm to begin with. They had already accumulated a lot of power, but because they did not have a path to guide them, their progress had been slow. Yet at that instant, as the brand of the cultivation system in their bodies and the future became clear in their minds, their levels of cultivation increased exponentially under the guidance of the small cauldron. They broke through from the Berserker Soul Realm to Man Cultivation Realm, then to Earth Cultivation Realm. There were even some old monsters who broke through from Earth Cultivation Realm to Heaven Cultivation Realm. All of their epiphanies could be obtained from Su Ming. All of their paths had already been laid out. Among the 600,000 cultivators, there were a dozen-something old men who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm more than 1,000 years ago. In fact, they had even taken that step forward and found their way to Man Cultivation Realm and even Earth Cultivation Realm. They were the most suitable people for the Berserkers to have their levels of cultivation increase by leaps and bounds. The years of accumulation and the struggles they faced throughout their lives had caused these people to feel as if there were thousands of rivers in their bodies, but they could not fuse them together. Right then, as Su Ming's path of cultivation was branded in their minds, it was as if they had guided those thousands of rivers to fuse into an ocean. Manya threw his head back and roared. His old face changed rapidly at that moment, and when he turned into a middle-aged man, his level of cultivation moved straight into Heaven Cultivation Realm. He took another step forward and reached World Plane Realm. He could reach World Plane Realm because Su Ming had a true world clone. He had an endless amount of power of world planes, and he could let the Berserkers absorb it as much as they wanted. Once Manya reached World Plane Realm, he reached another breakthrough and stepped in a Lunar Culpa Realm. Only then did he stop. This was what it meant by having accumulated strength for a long period of time. It was also what great Berserker tribe had been preparing all those years ago and had been waiting for this moment to erupt. They left a seal in their blood, and it was like turning a flood into a dam. Only a portion of the water could pass through to maintain their level of cultivation and life force. It was the same for generations of their bloodline. One day, when the Berserker's path was confirmed and the Berserker's system was branded in the hearts of all Berserkers, the dam would be broken, and the cultivation bases that had been held back for countless years would erupt in one go. Wu Shuang, Xue Xia, Tian Qi, and the others had all moved into Lunar Culpa Realm. This was their current limit, but it was not their final limit. Once they went to true Morning Dao world and got used to the aura of the world outside, their levels of cultivation would increase exponentially. Overall, the fated kin had the greatest change in their levels of cultivation. There were practically no fated kin whose level of cultivation was lower than that of man cultivators. The ones who had the greatest increase in their levels of cultivation were two people. One of them was Chi Lei Tian, the successor of the lightning berserker in the past. He was a hot-tempered old man who had half of his lightning crystal snatched away by Su Ming. As his level of cultivation rose, he moved past lunar Kulpa realm and reached solar Kulpa realm. However, he was not the strongest. The strongest among the 600,000 berserkers was Nan Gonghen, the fated kin's tribe leader, Su Ming's friend in the past, and Nan Gonghen, who had always addressed Su Ming as his benefactor, had reached great completion in plain Kulpa realm. By the looks of it, he was only one step away from reaching the edge of Mastery Realm. This was the Berserkers. This was a great leap for their race, and it was the eruption of their accumulated strength after tens of thousands of years. Only Fong Songlan's level of cultivation did not increase. Instead, she looked slightly weaker. To her, the light from the small cauldron did not seem to be stimulating her blood. Instead, it seemed to be able to injure her. Her face was slightly pale, but she still smiled as she looked at the berserkers cheering around her. She was happy for the berserkers' great leap. Besides the increase in the levels of cultivation of the 600,000 cultivators in the area, the berserkers who could not come to greet Su Ming on the islands in the land of berserkers also experienced varying degrees of improvement under the light. Su Ming looked around him and saw the berserkers' levels of cultivation increasing exponentially under the light from the small cauldron. He also noticed that Fong Songlan's face had turned pale, and he immediately swung his arm. The light around Fong Songlan's body disappeared, and her complexion slowly returned to normal. She smiled gently at Su Ming. She looked as if she wanted to say something, but at that moment, the entire sky suddenly roared. The weather changed, and the seal in the sky looked as if it was about to shatter. The entire world looked as if it was covered in fog. That fog tumbled about, as if it had gathered together to form a malicious spirit. When it roared at the ground, three incredibly powerful wills that could shake the entire berserker's world descended swiftly. Monthly votes. Chapter 1350. The three wills in Yin Death Vortex had once surpassed the might of heaven in Su Ming's eyes, and he did not know whether he would have the power to fight against them in his life. At the instant the three wills appeared, an ancient presence filled the berserker's world, causing all those who sensed it to feel as if their lives had reached their limit. Fatigue rose from the depths of their hearts. The world distorted. The fog tumbled about. The seal in the sky seemed to be slightly unstable. They did not speak. Just the descent of their wills immediately formed a powerful, mighty pressure that caused the world to tremble. It was as if with just one thought, they could make the berserker's world crumble. These were the three rulers Su Ming had once believed to be in Yin Death Vortex. Yet at that moment, Su Ming did not believe that the three ancient wills were the final rulers in Yin Death Vortex. Instead, in his eyes, the three wills were servants who had been forced to stay in the place and had no choice but to obey the secrets of Yin Death Vortex. Su Ming, a low roar that sounded like the might of heaven echoed through the entire berserker's world. At the same time, the fog tumbled about in front of Su Ming, and three figures appeared. They were three old men dressed in black, white, and gray long robes. They had no hair, and there were signs of time in the depths of their eyes as they stared at Su Ming. The one who had spoken just now was the black-robed old man. Since you've already left and escaped from your karma in the fifth ocean, why did you return? The white-robed old man asked in a hoarse voice. At the instant he spoke, a sharp glare shone in Su Ming's eyes. It was you in the past. Su Ming smiled. He could tell that voice. It belonged to the will who had threatened him after he descended in the past. It was me, the white-robed old man said faintly. Su Ming, if Su Xian Yi hadn't attacked you in the past, it would have been impossible for you to have escaped from the fifth ocean. since you dared to return and kill our divine clones, then this time, you have given us a chance to restore order." The black-robed old man's words were dark. He glared at Su Ming, and killing intent appeared in his eyes. "This time, Su Xian, he won't be able to save you. This is Death Vortex. Even Su Xian, he won't dare to show himself. I'd like to see how you will escape." The black-robed old man laughed coldly. "I can give you a chance. Stay here and continue being Death's child. We will not pursue the matter of you killing our divine clones. Or else, without Su Xianyi's help, you won't be able to escape from us," the white-robed old man said faintly. "Even if your return was part of Su Xianyi's plan, you will of it. You will definitely fail this time because—" Before the black-robed old man finished speaking, Su Ming had already started, but he had already started. "Child, Su Death." Su Ming swung his arm, and the fog in the world tumbled backwards layer by layer before disappearing in an instant. The unstable seal in the sky instantly became several times sturdier, and the mighty pressure from the three old men's divine senses disappeared as if Su Ming had just swung his arm. "Did your divine clones die too quickly and don't have time to let you know what happened before they died? Or did you just wake up and can't tell the difference between the strong and the weak? Are you overestimating yourselves?" Su Ming asked coldly with an indifferent expression. The black-robed old man's expression changed, and the white-robed old man's pupils shrank slightly. Only the gray-robed old man's expression remained the same. He did not say a single word, and even at that moment, his expression did not change. "You're just asking for death." As the black-robed old man's expression changed, a will so great that it was almost terrifying erupted from his body with a bang and charged towards Su Ming to suppress him. As one of the three great wills in Death region, the old man only needed to use his will to suppress anyone who showed disrespect to him, and all signs of their lives would immediately crumble. This was a suppression based on the difference in their state of being, and it was the awe-inspiring divine ability of one of the three great wills. Yet this time, at the instant his will came pressing down, a piercing cold glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes. His will appeared, and with a bang, it spread out without any hesitation. Once it crashed into the black-robed old man's will in an invisible manner, a hint of derision appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. In the midst of the booming sounds, the black-robed old man's expression changed again. His will tumbled backwards, and he was forced back continuously. Only when he was 1,000 feet away did he stop. When he lifted his head, disbelief and shock appeared on his face. "Your state of being, this is..." At that moment, the white-robed old man's pupils shrank, and he lifted his right hand to point at Su Ming. "With the will of heaven in this expanse cosmos, I will seal your mind and soul. Destroy." With that one point, an eye manifested in the air in front of Su Ming. It stared at him, and as it closed in on him, it looked as if it wanted to seal him. With a calm expression, Su Ming turned his head around to look at the white-robed old man. His will swept through the area, and with one glance, booming sounds reverberated in the air. The white-robed old man shuddered, and when he took a few steps back, the same shock as the black-robed old man appeared on his face. At the same time he moved back, the eye that closed in on Su Ming turned crimson. It swelled up, and with a bang it exploded. "Is that all?" Su Ming shook his head. He was slightly disappointed. The three wills had been incredibly powerful in the past, but at that moment, even Su Xian, he was stronger than them. In truth, it was not that the three wills were too weak, but because of Su Ming's growth over the 1,000-something years, especially after he possessed true Morning Dao world, his existence had already surpassed the limits of a cultivator. He had already stepped into the path to Avakania realm. In fact, his arid curse was a divine ability that even the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe was wary of. It could curse arid triads' will, and it could make arid triads will feel danger. It could fight against those in Avakania realm. In this state, even if Su Ming could not be said to be invincible in all of arid triad expanse cosmos, it would be difficult for him to find a lot of opponents. The black-robed old man's expression changed. He moved forward, and in an instant his entire body turned into black fog. The white-robed old man by his side did the same. With a single move, he turned into white fog. As for the gray-robed old man, a glint appeared in his eyes, and he immediately placed his palms together. The black and white fog surrounded him, causing the gray-robed old man's eyes to show a distinct black and white color. When he stared at Su Ming, he spoke for the first time in a hoarse voice. "You're very strong. I don't know why you've become so strong, even though it has been 1,000-something years since we last met, and your will is rather familiar to me. But as the three great wills of Death Vortex and as servants of Morris Alba, we are not people you can easily shake. I asked you to go to Divine and Star Ocean. The fifth ocean opened the path to Dark Dawn, and even asked you to search for the Sealed King in the barren lands of Divine Essence. We weren't lying to you, but were tests for you. It's a pity that Su Xian, and D Tian interfered. They didn't want you to wake up, didn't want you to understand, so they used all sorts of methods to interfere with you. When you didn't follow our instructions and ended up hating us, oh well, you've already come to stand against us. Even if you knew everything, you would still have made the same choice." As the gray-robed old man spoke, he seemed to sigh softly and pushed his hands forward. Green is Death Soul. All lives that are born or enter Death region are green. Is also known as the servants of Morris Alba, the guide of Death's children. The three are black, white, and gray. 3 kill green. The gray-robed old man cast Su Ming a deep glance. At the instant he pushed his hands forward, an invisible gust of wind appeared in front of him. It swiftly gathered together and turned into a huge hand. That hand covered the sky and earth, and it went to seize Su Ming. A feeling of danger rose in Su Ming's heart, and a focused look appeared in his eyes. The gray-robed old man's words were still echoing in his head. There seemed to be a strange secret contained within those words. However, Su Ming knew too few clues, which was why he could not connect all of them together to obtain an answer. At that moment, he saw a mighty pressure that seemed to specifically target the lives in Death Vortex coming from the huge hand, as if it wanted to wipe him off. Su Ming's pupils shrank. He took a few steps back and closed his eyes. At the instant he did so, he called out to his true world clone in his heart. During that instant, true morning Tao world beyond Death Vortex roared. The vast true world instantly distorted, and like a rubber band, it would occasionally expand and occasionally shrink. The lives in the true world could not sense any of these changes, but as the true world shrank and expanded, Su Ming's eyes flew open while he was in Death Vortex. At the instant he did so, the third eye at the center of his brows flew open. It was the spot where Su Ming stored true morning Tao world. At the instant he opened it, a strange change immediately appeared in his pupil. That pupil would occasionally expand endlessly, as if it occupied the entire third eye. At other times, it would shrink to a fine line, as if it had disappeared. When Su Ming saw the huge hand closing in on him, he spoke slowly. With this law of fate, frame the path to the true world. At the instant he said those words, the power of the 160 million laws of fate filling the Berserker's world started boiling with a bang, causing the Berserker's world to distort. With the blood of the Berserkers in this land, activate the guide to the Vortex. The blood of all the Berserkers, the desire in their hearts for the Berserkers to rise to power, and the hope in their hearts that Su Ming could bring them out of this place gathered together to form a guide. It was like a candle in the darkness. With my will in this land, spread out the summit of the universe. The world roared, and the universe trembled. The ferocious beasts beyond the seal immediately retreated, as if they had sensed some sort of terror. It was especially so for true morning Tao world beyond Death Vortex. As it shrank and expanded, it swiftly pressed down on Death Vortex. True world, descend. Su Ming lifted his arms, and at the instant the huge hand closed in on him, he swung his arms. The land of berserkers immediately trembled violently. As the world roared, his true world spread out from the third eye at the center of Su Ming's brows. True morning Tao world descended in the land of berserkers' dimension. It descended in the place where he existed. The clouds in the sky changed, as if the galaxy was flowing in reverse and the universe was changing. The incoming hand came to an abrupt halt 5 feet away from Su Ming. With a bang, it crumbled and disintegrated right before Su Ming's eyes. True morning Tao world. This is true morning Tao world's presence. You possessed true morning Tao world. Chapter 1351. He might be disappointed and resigned that his monthly votes were not on the list, but he could not complain about anything. However, the recommendation votes were about to explode for the 3rd day in a row. If he still did not get on the list, it would be a little unsightly. The true world descended and robbed him of his recommendation votes. Pirated version. All right, let's find someone gentler, not the split dawn. Please give your recommendation votes to Chio Mo. If you forget to vote, be careful of the split dawn. Chapter 1352. The presence of true morning Tao world spread out swiftly from Su Ming's third eye. The sky rumbled and the ground trembled. This was the first time true morning Tao world's presence was completely revealed in Death Vortex. It surrounded Su Ming, causing his long hair to float in the air, his robes to flutter, and the pupils in his third eye to shrink and expand. At that moment, Su Ming possessed the power of the god of berserkers, but he was also filled with a strange and enchanting malice. That malice was enough to make a person unable to forget it once they saw it. True morning Tao world is me. I am true morning Tao world. In the face of the 3 wills' shock towards Su Ming's identity, Su Ming answered their question with an aloof and thunderous voice that echoed in all directions. His words echoed in the air, and each of them was stronger than the last. When the final word tumbled out of his mouth, the sky and earth roared at the same time. The huge palm in front of Su Ming crumbled, and the gray-robed old man's expression changed. He staggered several thousands of feet backwards. The black and white balls of fog beside him looked as if they had been swept away by a violent gust of wind, and they returned to human form in a very pathetic manner. The 3 of them stared at Su Ming in shock. Even then, their faces were filled with disbelief. So what if you possessed a true world? A glint appeared in the gray-robed old man's eyes. When he lifted his arms, the black-robed and white-robed old men immediately formed seals. They moved, and the 2 of them turned into black and white fog again. When they swept in all directions, the gray-robed old man took a step forward. In an instant, his body turned into gray fog. It intersected with the black and white fog and gathered together to stir up space. An increasingly stronger will swiftly appeared. Morris Alba is not a field. A buzzing and indistinct voice came from the huge will that had appeared in the fog formed by the fusion of black, white, and gray. At the instant those words echoed in the air, the entire sky turned crimson. There seemed to be veins that looked like a spider's web in the crimson sky. They spread out endlessly, causing all those who saw them to feel as if the world had turned into a cage that had been covered up and sealed. The veins in the crimson sky looked like a spider's web at first glance, but when they took a closer look, they would find that there was something different about them. It would be difficult for them to tell just what was the thing that covered the sky. Everlasting transformation. The will in the fog that fused with the black, white, and gray let out a loud voice once again. As it echoed in the air, the sky and earth looked as if they had become still for an instant. That power of stillness seemed to have surpassed the immobilization art Su Ming had seen before. The entire world had come to a complete stop. Everything in the area, including the flames of life, came to a standstill. It was as if they were really like those 4 words. Immutable. For the first time, a solemn look appeared on Su Ming's face. The presence of a true world surrounded him. His body would occasionally become indistinct, and at other times, it would become clear. This was due to the presence of a true world surrounding him, and it was a form of resistance against Death Vortex. Morris Alba Wings. First slash. The low growl from the will in the fog spread out, and the world roared. Su Ming personally saw the crimson veins that covered the sky like a spider's web in the quiet world move at that instant. It was dancing as if it was flapping its wings. As it moved, a light breeze danced in the air. That seemingly harmless breeze made Su Ming's pupils shrink. The veins that covered the sky were not a spider's web, but wings. By the looks of it, they looked like the wings of a butterfly. A great sense of life-threatening danger rose in Su Ming's heart. At that moment, without any hesitation, he lifted his right hand and swung it forward while shouting 3 words. God of Berserker's transformation. He executed the God of Berserker's transformation in the Berserker's world. Almost at the instant Su Ming finished speaking, 10 million souls of great Berserkers rushed out from the area around his lifted right hand. As they roared soundlessly, they charged toward Su Ming's right hand and swiftly fused into it, causing it to instantly swell up. When Su Ming lifted his left hand, the tens of millions of souls of great Berserkers appeared again. Soon after, his legs, and then his body. The process of the God of Berserker's transformation was completed in the blink of an eye. Su Ming's body grew several times in size, and as he stood towering in the world, he became the true God of great Berserkers. The God of Berserkers' transformation transformed into the God of Berserkers. More than 100 million souls of great Berserkers fused into him. His body swelled up, and the power of the Berserkers erupted to its limit, causing Su Ming to feel as if he possessed the power to tear apart the world. The feeling of having an indescribably great power in his hands made Su Ming feel as if he could fight against those in Avacania realm at that moment. This was the most perfect body of great Berserker tribe. However, even during the era of the antecedental spirits, great Berserker tribe did not possess this supreme body. This was the one and only God of Berserkers formed after countless souls of great Berserker tribe gathered together over countless years. The God of Berserkers' transformation caused the world to tremble. The invisible power that froze the world also became unstable. When Su Ming threw his head back and roared, his voice shook the sky and earth. It was a madness that could compare to the ancient god's roar. At the instant his voice reverberated in the air, the invisible power that froze the Berserkers instantly crumbled. The 600,000 Berserkers in the area stared at Su Ming in excitement. At that moment, they could sense the worship in their blood growing even stronger. If Su Ming, before the God of Berserker's transformation, made all the Berserkers zealous and respectful, and he could even cause their blood to resonate with him, then after the God of Berserker's transformation, all the Berserkers no longer felt the resonance in their blood. Instead, they felt something that surpassed resonance. It was as if they had seen their ancestor. God of Berserkers! God of Berserkers! God of Berserkers! The 600,000 Berserkers knelt down and worshipped Su Ming. When their voices surged into the sky, Morris Alba's wings that covered the sky charged towards Su Ming with a wind that seemed to want to destroy the world. That wind did not just want to destroy Su Ming, but also the entire Berserker's world. When it closed in, Su Ming, who had gained a huge body after the God of Berserker's transformation, had a hint of derision appear in his eyes. It came from his confidence and the rampaging power of great Berserker tribe filling his body. This is the Berserker's world. Su Ming lifted his right hand. I am the Berserker's God of Berserkers. If you're the legendary Morris Alba's wings, then so be it. But how dare you fight against me with your illusory wings? Su Ming did not wait for the Morris Alba's wings to close in on him. He took a step forward, lifted his arms, and leaped up. Then, he pushed his palms together and slammed them against the incoming wings. He did not use any divine abilities or arts with it, but it gathered all of Su Ming's power after the God of Berserker's transformation, along with the determination and madness of 100 million something souls of great berserkers to protect the berserkers. There is also the true worlds will gathered in Su Ming's third eye at the center of his brows. All of these things fused together and turned into Su Ming's simple throw. It looked as if he had torn apart all laws and created a law of the world that belonged to the berserkers. When he swung his arm, it crashed against the Morris Alba's wings, and the world seemed to have become eternal for an instant. Shatter! Su Ming's eyes turned crimson. He growled, and the world roared from the state of eternity. The ground trembled violently, and the sky distorted. The crimson Morris Alba's wings let out cracking sounds before they crumbled and fell backwards. The wind that could destroy everything could not destroy Su Ming's body, could not destroy his will, and could not destroy the berserkers he protected. The Morris Alba's wings crumbled, and the black and gray fog that had fused together was instantly thrown into chaos by Su Ming's rampaging god of berserkers' attack. When it scattered, it turned into the three old men. Their faces were pale, and there was shock on their faces as they swiftly retreated. Their wills trembled, and their hearts were filled with disbelief. After all, the first manifestation of Morris Alba's wings was a divine ability that could only be executed by the three of them together. It was a supreme power that could destroy an entire expanse cosmos. Even though it was not the legendary harmonious Morris Alba's wings, they had borrowed its form and possessed a hint of that legendary power. Yet even so, they could not shake Su Ming in the slightest. Su Ming's god of berserkers' transformation brought fear to the three old men, which was something rarely seen in them. Yet the moment they retreated, Su Ming turned his head around in midair. His eyes were bloodshot, and the time limit of his god of berserkers' transformation was about to disappear. When it was about to disappear, Su Ming's gaze landed on the white-robed old man. That person was the ancient who had once forced Su Ming into a corner. Su Ming's killing intent towards the white-robed old man was the strongest. At the instant his gaze landed on him, he lifted his right hand and pointed at the white-robed old man. With the honor of a true world, the might of the god of berserkers, and the master of the universe, I sentence you to have your body and soul destroyed. When Su Ming said those words, the area around him immediately roared. The presence of a true world became violent, and the power of the god of berserkers filled the area. Once it gathered together, it turned into a monstrous will of heaven. When it filled the area, it swiftly enveloped the white-robed old man. The old man's expression changed. He formed a seal with his hands, but just as he was about to fight back, die, Su Ming's lifted finger turned into a palm, and he seized the air in the direction of the white-robed old man from a distance. His palm turned into a fist, as if he had seized the white-robed old man's soul in his palm. When he squeezed it tightly, the white-robed old man let out a shrill scream of pain. Fear and despair appeared on his face, along with disbelief that had been present since the start. This is impossible. It's impossible for him to kill me. Even if he possessed true Morning Tao world, he still doesn't have the right to kill me. This is... The white-robed old man's body twisted. As he screamed shrilly, a bang shot up into the air, and his body was torn to shreds. He turned into white fog, intending to flee in all directions, but he came to an abrupt halt. It was as if a breeze had blown past him, and right before everyone's eyes, the white fog that was the old man looked as if it had been wiped off and disappeared without a trace. The three great wills in Death Vortex, who had existed since ancient times, found it hard to believe that it was just as Su Ming had said. Their bodies and souls were destroyed, and from then on, they no longer had any signs of life. In fact, it was impossible for them to reincarnate. On the third day, it exploded, and today, the first chapter was delivered. Brothers, do you still have monthly votes? Chapter 1353. Almost at the same time the white-robed old man's body and soul were destroyed, Su Ming's body changed. The soul of the great berserker tribe spread out and sank into his body once again, causing the duration of the god of berserker's transformation to end. His body rapidly recovered before his eyes, and when he returned to normal, his expression remained the same. There was not a hint of injuries caused by the god of berserker's transformation. This was because Su Ming's current foundation had surpassed that of when he had just come to understand the god of berserker's transformation. That was why even if he executed the god of berserker's transformation, it would not affect him in the slightest after it ended. Su Ming's gaze was piercingly cold. He stood in midair, and the area around him was filled with dead silence. The black-robed old man stared at the empty space where the white-robed old man's body and soul had been destroyed in a daze. No matter how he tried to sense the area, he could not find a single trace of the white-robed old man. This caused his expression to turn incredibly sour and fear to appear in his eyes. He originally thought that they could not be killed, but everything before his eyes told him cruelly that they were not indestructible. The gray-robed old man did not look towards the spot where the white-robed old man had died. Instead, he stared at Su Ming in a daze. There was a strange light flashing in his eyes, as if he had seen something the black-robed old man could not. But the more he saw it, the paler his face became. There was even a hint of complicated emotions and anguish on his face. The 600,000 berserkers had personally seen their god of berserkers kill one of the three great wills as they knelt down. Perhaps most of the berserkers did not know what this meant, but with Manya, Wu Shuang, Nangong Hen, and the others' levels of cultivation, they could understand more. They knew what the existence of the three great wills represented, and they also knew just how strong they were. That was why a storm was raging in their hearts at that moment. They might know that Su Ming was strong, but since they did not have a comparison, they could not tell just how strong he was. Yet now, with this comparison, they could clearly sense that Su Ming's strength was not in the ordinary sense of the word. He was a supreme being who could kill the three great wills. Su Ming's aloof gaze landed on the black-robed old man. A mighty pressure formed after he killed the white-robed old man branded itself on the black-robed old man through Su Ming's gaze, causing him to instinctively take a few steps back. The next one is you. Su Ming, I have the seals of your eldest senior brother and your second senior brother's souls. If you kill me, then they won't be able to escape death as well. The black-robed old man shouted fiercely with a reserved expression on his face. It is precisely because of this that I must kill you. When Su Ming said those words flatly, he took a swift step forward. The black-robed old man's expression changed drastically, and he retreated hastily. The gray-robed old man next to him had a look of determination on his face, and it was a look of struggle. Circumference seal. The gray-robed old man waved his sleeve and said decisively to the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man gritted his teeth. At that moment, he was in a life-and-death crisis. He was not like before, when he believed that Su Ming would not be able to kill him, and because of that, he could not help but speak arrogantly. However, when he saw the white-robed old man die with his own eyes, he could no longer care about anything else. As he gritted his teeth, madness appeared in his eyes, and with a swing of his arm, he turned into a large amount of black fog. The fog contained his great will. It was an incredibly noble will in Death Vortex and could be worshipped by all manner of lives. He stood high above the masses and could control countless lives' fates. If he could leave Death Vortex in the world beyond, then with his great will, he could fight against antecedental spirits. In fact, during the era when true Morning Tao worlds was asleep, he could stand above all cultivators, but right then, when he faced Su Ming, he fell into an incredibly pathetic state. He did not feel any unwillingness to accept this. Su Ming's strength had already intimidated him deeply. If he wanted to live, he had to go mad. All right, I am willing to become a square. When the fog that was the black-robed old man let out a low roar, it tumbled about and swiftly grew to nearly 100,000 feet. It formed a gigantic square in the world, but it did not rise vertically. Instead, it was laid flat on the ground. At the same time, killing intent shone in the gray-robed old man's eyes. With a complicated and ferocious look, he turned into gray fog with a bang and charged into the sky. In an instant, he turned into a gigantic gray circle. Circumference sky. The gray-robed old man's voice was ancient and resolute. It echoed in all directions. Place. The black-robed old man's voice boomed from the black fog beneath him. His voice was filled with madness, and it contained an indomitable will. This was a critical moment, a matter of life and death. He had to give it his all. Circumference kill. At the instant, the gray fog that had turned into a circle in the sky let out a buzzing sound. The circular fog descended swiftly and charged toward Su Ming. Soon after, buzzing sounds came from the black fog on the ground. The black fog rose swiftly and charged toward Su Ming. A powerful wave of killing intent filled the world and charged towards Su Ming with a howl. At that moment, it was as if the sky had collapsed and the ground had risen. As the world pressed down on him, it destroyed all wills and existences within it. It was especially so when the black-robed old man and the gray-robed old man executed the art at the same time. A sealing power existed between the two, and there was also a tight connection between them. When the divine ability was executed, the world looked as if it was about to turn into chaos. Everything became indistinct, and killing intent shook the sky. The might of the world, huh? I have it as well. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever. He looked at the circle that represented the sky charging towards him and the square that represented the ground closing in with loud, booming sounds. A hint of a cold sneer appeared at the corners of his lips. If you use the ground to close in on me, then I will use the power of mountains to suppress you. Mountain shifter. Su Ming swung his arm and pointed at the incoming square fog with his right hand. The power of mountain shifter erupted from him, and the shadows of mountains immediately appeared around him. There was no end to those mountains, and they were all the mountains Su Ming had seen and experienced in his life. There was Dark Mountain, the Ninth Summit, and many more. There were 100,000 mountains packed densely together, and once they appeared, Su Ming pointed at them. The mountains charged towards the incoming square fog. Booming sounds surged into the sky, and the suppression from the 100,000 mountains immediately caused the square fog to tremble. At the same time, Su Ming lifted his left hand and pointed at the sky. If you use the power of the sky collapsing to descend on me, then I will use the extreme darkness ocean remover to raise it. Ocean remover. As Su Ming smiled coldly, a powerful black light erupted from his body. There was a freezing chill to it, as well as an abyss that could make a person's vision darken. When Su Ming pointed at it, it was as if half of the black seawater had devoured all light and swept through the universe. There were 100,000 mountains suppressing down on that place, and the extreme darkness ocean remover was stirred up in barren sky. The world roared. Su Ming had his hands up and down, and with his power alone, he fought against it. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, the circle in barren sky could not descend, and the square from the ground could not rise, so the divine ability could only roar at that moment. It could not push down, and the killing intent could not be released. It could only remain in a stalemate. The presence of Su Ming's true world had pushed him to be able to do this. At the instant the divine ability was in a stalemate, Su Ming lowered his head and looked at the 100,000 mountains beneath him. Killing intent shone in his eyes. When he opened his mouth, a ray of purple light shot out. It was the end of Will's sword, one of Su Ming's supreme treasures. At that moment, the sacred vessel of Great Abyss Tribe shone with a dazzling light in Su Ming's hand. With a flash, its presence surged like a tidal wave and stirred up a piercing sound. It shot through the 100,000 mountains and charged towards the place. This sword was enough to wipe out a will. The sword was known as the end of Will's sword, and it was the killing sword created to specifically target wills among the 9 swords. As it charged forward, it instantly shot through the place, and under Su Ming's divine thought, the sword will erupted. This time, it did not erupt with 3/10 of his power when he killed the divine clone, but with his full power. At the instant the sword will erupted, the ground roared non-stop. The sword will surge into the sky and manifested into countless sharp swords that swept through the area. Shrill roars came from the fog in the area. They were filled with despair and great resentment, but they did not last for long. The ground trembled, and the 100,000 mountains disappeared. The fog in the area disappeared without a trace, like a gust of wind. As for the black-robed old man's will, it disappeared along with the fog, destroyed for all eternity. Purple light shone and returned to Su Ming from the ground. When Su Ming spoke, it seeped into the fog. All of this happened incredibly quickly, so much so that when the place disappeared, the circle in the sky was still lifted by the light of extreme darkness. However, the gray-robed old man's face was formed by fog, and there was a crazed look on his face, as if he could see through the light of extreme darkness and see Su Ming beneath him. He had naturally sensed the black-robed old man's death. It was a true form of wiping him off, and there was no possibility of him being revived. As the leader of the three great wills, the gray-robed old man knew more secrets that the other two wills did not know. Do you want to use this child to wipe off the three of us? Or should I say that we can't be enemies with him? Is this your will? But he hasn't woken up yet. He can't be considered a wheel. The madness in the gray-robed old man's eyes grew stronger, and he threw his head back to roar. If that's the case, I'd like to see just what your intentions are. The servant of Morris Alba burns himself and burns his thoughts to turn into butterflies. The gray-robed old man's face moved, and the fog in the sky immediately tumbled about. A huge face gathered on the light of extreme darkness. That face was tens of thousands of feet tall, and as its voice echoed in the air, flames instantly burned on it. From a distance, it looked like a sun. As the flames burned, gray smoke tumbled about. The wisps of smoke did not rise into the sky, but surrounded the area. As they did so, they grew larger. Su Ming swung his right hand, and the light of extreme darkness disappeared in front of him. Once it was revealed, the gray-robed old man and the wisps of smoke surrounding him burned in the sky. As the wisps of smoke spread out, pain appeared on the gray-robed old man's face, and he swiftly growled. With the body of a servant, I summoned the shadow of Morris Alba. When the old man roared, the wisps of smoke surrounding him tumbled about and changed. From a distance, they turned into two wings, just like a butterfly formed by gray smoke. The second update is here. I've been going on for 3 days straight, and my body can't take it anymore. I'm going to rest for a while, then I'll write the third update. Chapter 1354. The gray butterfly did not have any other colors. When it spread its wings, it was 100,000 feet long, and an indescribable, awe-inspiring presence descended on the ground. At the instant Su Ming saw the gray butterfly, a legend that had been circulating in the Berserker's world when he was still in the land of Berserkers rose in his head again. There was a butterfly, and its name was Harmonious Morris Alba. Harmonious Morris Alba. The old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe showed himself for the first time in the land of Berserkers. He stared at the sky in a daze, then at the gray butterfly. A wise and far-sighted light shone in his eyes. Based on my guess, the final link lies in the legend of the ancient era Harmonious Morris Alba. That should be the case. When the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe mumbled, a complicated look appeared on his face, but only appeared for an instant before it was replaced by determination. Legend, Su Ming whispered softly. The legend regarding Harmonious Morris Alba had been passed down in the land of Berserkers for an eternity. It was the first time he learned of a butterfly known as Harmonious Morris Alba. When it flapped its wings, it could cause the world to change, and every single time it did so, different anomalies would appear. Su Ming still remembered that when he returned to the ancient past in the world of All Spirits Hall, he had also seen a fleeting butterfly appear in the sky, filled with snow and wind at the instant the blood dragon, shattered in great, used Elder's prophecy of the Berserker sky. Su Ming seemed to have come to a vague understanding of something. In silence, he stared at the gray butterfly in the sky. The butterfly was also staring at him. It flapped its wings, and a light breeze stirred up. With a will to destroy everything, it descended on the entire land of berserkers. It was a pity that the butterfly was still not the true harmonious Morris Alba of the legends. It was just a projection formed by the gray-robed old man's will. In silence, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and the barren cauldron manifested on his palm. As it shone with a bronze light, it covered Su Ming's face, causing others to be unable to see his expression at that moment. They could only see that as the light from the bronze cauldron grew brighter, a figure gradually appeared on it. It was a built figure with a long spear in his hand. At the instant it appeared, a primitive and savage presence spread out. It was so strong that it instantly enveloped the entire area. At the same time, the 100 million something great berserker souls in Su Ming's body woke up from their slumber after the god of berserkers' transformation. They instantly surged into the bronze cauldron, and countless protruding faces appeared on it. As the gray butterfly flapped its wings, the figure on the bronze cauldron lifted its head, revealing a pair of blood-red eyes and a hint of savagery. With a flash, the figure charged towards the gray butterfly in the sky. He was so quick that he stirred up a whirlwind. As it howled, it looked as if a gigantic cauldron of whirlwind had appeared in the world. A large number of faces belonging to great berserkers' souls manifested around the cauldron, and they looked as if they were roaring. The cauldron looked illusory, but it also felt corporeal. As it condensed, the spear-wielding figure became even larger. In the blink of an eye, it was thousands of feet tall. Berserker, when the figure charged out, he let out a hoarse but shocking roar. As he roared, he instantly closed in on the gray butterfly, which was already flapping its wings and stirring up a destructive wind. He charged straight for its right wing. Su Ming's expression was calm. With the cauldron in his right hand, he watched all of this. Booming sounds reverberated in the world at that instant. The entire berserker's world looked as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were swaying. As it swayed violently, the figure that appeared on the bronze cauldron shuddered and crumbled. However, the gray butterfly's right wing also trembled as the figure disappeared. A large number of cracks appeared on it, and with a bang, it fell to pieces. It's a pity that this is just a projection you created on your own. It's not the legendary harmonious Morris Alba, Su Ming said softly. When his words echoed in the air, the gray butterfly in the sky who had lost one of its wings looked towards him. It flapped its left wing again, and the destructive power surged forward with a bang. Su Ming sighed softly. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the gray butterfly that only had one wing left. Immediately, the supreme treasure on his finger flew out. It grew larger, and in the blink of an eye, it closed in on the gray butterfly. It was already 100,000 feet long. With one crash, the sky shattered. Cracks appeared on the purplish-red seal in the sky. When a loud bang reverberated in the air, the entire sky shattered to pieces and crumbled. As the seal in the sky crumbled, the ferocious spirits in the world outside fell back before they could rush in. Their bodies were instantly reduced to ashes. The gray butterfly that only had one wing left also crumbled. It was reduced to powder, and when it vanished into thin air, it also took with it the will that had sighed from the gray-robed old man. "You are not the one who destroyed me." These were the old man's final words. Then, the three great wills that had existed since ancient times in Death Vortex were completely wiped off for all eternity. The sky roared. Cracks continued spreading out. If anyone cast their gaze over, they would find that the sky looked like shattered stones that were continuously shattering. As they shattered, a large number of fragments flew out, and the scene of the apocalypse shook the hearts of all those who saw it. Su Ming's 100,000 feet ring swept through the world outside with a howl. Wherever it went, all the ferocious spirits in the world outside would be crushed. No matter what level of cultivation they had, all of them disintegrated the moment they touched the ring. The ring roared and rushed out of the berserker's world with a piercing sound. As it spun rapidly in death vortex, it charged toward the exit. It was so fast that it instantly left into the distance. As it moved, it swept up the fog, blasted apart the aura of death, and crushed all the living beings that flew out of the dimension. In fact, even the dragon of death found it difficult to dodge in despair. Its body was crushed by the impact, and the ring pierced through it. All of this might have seemed to have happened over a long period of time, but in truth, it only took the span of a dozen-something breath for the ring to rush out of death vortex and appear in true Morning Tao world. At the instant it did so, it looked as if it had opened up a tunnel that connected true Morning Tao world and the berserker's world. It turned into a vortex that stirred up all of true Morning Tao world's presence, and it charged towards it with loud bangs. Su Ming's was in it. At the same time he rushed into the tunnel, he lifted his hands while he was in the berserker's world. He lifted his head and stared at the shattered sky. We will leave death vortex. From now on, the berserker's world will become a part of true Morning Tao world. I will bring all of you and the entire world to rush out. Su Ming's voice echoed in all the berserker's ears and lingered for a long time. As true Morning Tao world's presence swept out from the vortex, from the distance, it looked as if a huge hand from true Morning Tao world had sunk into death vortex with an indescribable presence. It seized the berserker's world and wanted to drag it out. I can't write anymore. Today, I have 8,000 words. Do you still have monthly votes? If you don't forget about your recommendation tickets. Chapter 1355. The entire land of berserkers trembled. Without the Dead Sea, huge cracks swiftly appeared on the ground. They intersected with each other, but besides the edges, the insides of the land did not crumble. As the ravines filled the land and trembled violently, a staircase appeared with a bang. It was as if the land was slowly rising after it had been split apart. The sky completely shattered, and the chaotic space in death vortex could be seen. Su Ming stood in midair. When he lifted his arms, his hair danced in the air, his long robes fluttered, and a brilliant light shone in his eyes. With the will of my true world. As Su Ming's voice echoed in the air, the berserker's world shuddered. The presence of a true world filled the entire area, as if it had truly turned into a huge hand. It seized the berserker's world and slowly lifted it up. The hearts of countless berserkers trembled. They were not afraid. Instead, their faces were filled with excitement and enthusiasm. They worshipped Su Ming, and even though the waves of his voice reverberated in the air while the world roared, they still could not suppress it. God of berserkers! God of berserkers! God of berserkers! Berserkers' laws of fate fused with the summit of a true world. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand and swung it around him. Immediately, the berserker's world roared violently. The power of the laws of fate that had gathered over the past 1,000-something years and was equivalent to 160 million laws of fate in the world outside swiftly manifested and charged toward Su Ming. There were 160 million laws of fate in the world, and true Morning Tao world's hand outside. With Su Ming as the center, they gathered together and erupted with a power that could shake death vortex. This power caused the hand that seized the berserker's world to swiftly swell up. It even looked as if it had gained corporeal form. It seized the berserker's world and lifted it off the ground. Countless islands, countless berserkers, and even the dust in the berserker's world rushed out of the ground at that instant. Once a huge pit was formed, they were blasted out of death dimension that contained the berserker's world. Su Ming spread his arms wide. His hair danced in the air. He did not move, but at the instant he rushed out of death dimension with the berserker's world. All the berserkers saw a world they could not see. This scene was just like what Great Yu's elder had said when he calculated the Berserker's heaven in the past. No one else could see the world he had seen before. Perhaps it was because he was blind, but perhaps it was precisely because he was blind that the world he saw contained some sort of meaning to the legacy. Yet no matter what at that moment, Su Ming allowed all the Berserkers to see the world that only he could see previously. The 600,000 Berserkers who worshipped the god of Berserkers and the larger number of Berserkers who had come to worship the god of Berserkers lifted their heads at that moment and saw the fog in Death Vortex. They saw the area beyond the Berserkers' world, and their breathing seemed to have come to a halt. They stared at all of this in a daze. Beneath them, under the land of Berserkers, was a hollow in the dimension that was getting further and further away. If anyone saw this from the distance, they would be able to see that the entire Berserkers' world looked as if it had turned into a gigantic stone. That stone was the land where the Berserkers lived, their legacy, and their islands. At that moment, that stone was rushing out of the Berserkers' dimension and into the whirlwind of Death in the endless vortex. I will bring all of you to see a world you could not see in the past. Su Ming's voice traveled into all the Berserkers' ears. As they roared in excitement, Su Ming brought the Berserkers' world into Death Vortex. The hand that seized the Berserkers' world was filled with a power that would not crumble. It allowed the vortex to sweep at it and Death fog to corrode it, but it did not waver. Instead, it maintained a certain speed and rose swiftly. However, they could enter Death Vortex, but they could not leave. Even the immortals in the past had only used a rune to pass through the vortex and avoid the suction force from Death Vortex. However, the immortals' rune had long since crumbled. Because of that, they could only leave Death Vortex by going against the flow. Su Ming had tried this in the past, but he had not succeeded. His eldest senior brother's people had also tried it, but in the end, they could only leave with the help of the three great wills. It would have been fine if Su Ming was alone this time. He could leave easily. In fact, even if there were 1,000, 10,000, or even 100,000 people, Su Ming would still be able to bring them away, even though it would be slightly difficult for him to do so. But at that moment, Su Ming was bringing all the Berserkers and the land of the Berserkers' world. Because of that, it was not easy for Su Ming. In truth, before he descended in the Berserkers' world, he had not thought about leaving with the land, but the laws of fate that had gathered in the Berserkers' world over the 1,000-something years had given him this chance. The fusion of the power of the true world and the laws of fate gave Su Ming the ability to make something that should have been impossible possible. However, the suction force from Death Vortex grew stronger as the land of Berserkers rose. In just a moment, the whistling sound from the suction force were deafening, as if there was also a huge hand that had seized the land of Berserkers and wanted to drag it back. But that was not all. At the same time the suction force reverberated in the air, a large number of dimensions in Death Vortex opened up, and a large number of ferocious beasts of all sorts of appearances rushed out with loud howls to charge towards the land of Berserkers. It was as if there was a will that Su Ming could not sense filling Death Vortex at that moment, luring the ferocious beasts to appear and stop Su Ming's crazed actions. Berserkers, hear me. Kill all those who stop us Berserkers from rushing out. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He swung his arm, and a gentle light immediately covered the land. Once he protected the fragile Berserkers on the islands, he spoke resolutely. If they did not go through slaughter, no powerful warriors would rise to power. Right then, the overall level of cultivation of the Berserkers had increased, but this sort of increase could only be truly turned into their own power after they experienced life and death situations. That was why Su Ming could have protected them at that moment, but he did not. He would have to pay a price to fill Death Vortex and see the world outside. He had to let the Berserkers know just how difficult it was. Only then would the Berserkers have the confidence to face all the obstacles in the future as they rose to power. Besides, even if Su Ming helped them this time and allowed the Berserkers to be protected under his wings, he could not protect the Berserkers forever. The disaster from Saint D Fire and Dark Dawn that would sweep through all of Arid Triad was about to arrive. This time was a test. If they could not get through this test, the Berserkers would not have the right to face the upcoming disaster. If that was the case, instead of dying in the hands of outsiders, it would be better for them to not leave Een Death Vortex. The races in the dimensions in Een Death Vortex have varying levels of cultivation. If the powerful ones are 2 realms higher than you, I will destroy them. If the weak ones are in the same realm as you or are slightly higher than you will destroy them. Either you will live and rush out of this place with me, so that you can witness the Berserkers rise to power in the world outside, or you will die here. What the Berserkers want is not a flower that can grow under protection, but a towering tree that can stand tall in the wind and rain. There was a cold and callous tone in Su Ming's voice. His words echoed in the hearts of the 600,000 Berserkers, causing a crimson glare to immediately appear in their eyes. A powerful killing intent, as well as a savage presence, erupted from each of them. Making the Berserkers rise to power was practically the greatest desire of all Berserkers. At that moment, without any hesitation, the strongest killing intent in their lives erupted from them. That killing intent surged into the sky and charged towards Een Death Vortex, towards the dimensional beasts who were charging towards them from beyond the land of Berserkers. It was especially so for Nan Gonghen and the others. Their level of cultivation had increased the most, and at that moment, they threw their heads back and roared. They were the first to move, and their killing intent surged into the sky. The fated kin were also among them. Killing was nothing to them. It did not matter whether it was the other races or the sea beasts. They had killed far too many over the 1,000-something years. At that moment, with aloof expressions on their faces, they rushed out and charged into the vortex like arrows that had left their bows. Fong Tsonglan's face turned even paler, but she still forced herself to endure it. She watched all of this with a smile, but there was no way Su Ming would not see her weakness. The moment the 600,000 cultivators rushed out, Su Ming moved and instantly appeared beside Fong Tsonglan to hold her hand. A wave of pure, bright, yang aura instantly fused into Fong Tsonglan's body and fused with the Een Death aura to turn into a wave of life force that belonged solely to Fong Tsonglan. With that life force surging in her body, Fong Tsonglan's complexion slowly improved. She lifted her head to look at Su Ming and bit her bottom lip as if she wanted to say something. I know that your body is slightly different from the Berserkers. Perhaps it should be said that you're not a Berserker. Compared to the Berserkers who have been living in Een Death region and are used to Een Death aura like the dead, you possess the power of bright yang from the world outside, Su Ming said softly while looking at Fong Tsonglan. This was something Su Ming had already known since the moment his blood had landed on Fong Tsonglan's fingertips and immediately disappeared. That is why I might have changed the true world's presence when it descended just now, so that the Berserkers could get used to it, but you were still not used to it. Right now, the aura of death in Een Death Vortex is thick, and you'll be even more uncomfortable. Su Ming looked at Fong Tsonglan gently. As he spoke, as the Berserkers' world charged through Een Death Vortex, shrill roars and the sounds of battle came from above. The 600,000 Berserkers were engaged in a battle to the death against the ferocious outsiders who lived next to them. But I'll get used to it. Fong Tsonglan sucked in a deep breath and looked at Su Ming before she spoke seriously. Her serious expression added a charming charm to her already beautiful face. Su Ming looked at Fong Tsonglan and smiled faintly. He held her hand and spoke softly. It's fine if you don't get used to it. I will make the universe get used to you. As Su Ming spoke, he lifted his left hand and pointed upwards. A gust of wind immediately rose from his finger and shot through the cracks between the Berserkers to land at the center of a four-armed man's brow. That man had power equivalent to those in Mastery Realm. With a ferocious smile, he attacked to kill a Berserker in Earth Cultivation Realm. But the moment he moved, a bang rang out at the center of his brow, and his head crumbled. Due to a sudden incident, the updates for this week will not be stable. There will be 2 updates and 1 update, but no matter how much I'm lacking, there will be 16 updates per week. If there is anything lacking, I promise to update it next week. Please forgive me. Chapter 1356. Blood gushed into the air, and the four-armed man's head exploded. His body froze for a moment before he was immediately swept into the vortex. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace. Su Ming still did not lift his head. He looked at Fong Tsanglan with a smile, and when her face turned slightly red, he yanked her arm and pulled her into his embrace. He used his own body heat to warm up Fong Tsanglan's loneliness for 1,000-something years. At the instant she was pulled into Su Ming's embrace, gentleness appeared in her eyes. It was as if standing in this place was the same as standing at the highest peak of her life. It was as if being by Su Ming's side was the most beautiful thing in her life. She wished that this moment would last forever, and she wished for nothing else. The gentleness and the slaughter served as a foil to it. It was as if a rainbow had suddenly appeared in a landscape painting. It was so bright, so eye-catching, so that it did not seem to fit into the painting, but it fused together beautifully. The abruptness was gone, and there was only beauty left. Shrill roars reverberated in the air, and shattered bodies flew everywhere. The 600,000 berserkers' madness for the sake of rising to power and leaving this place caused the only thing left in their minds at that instant: kill. This situation where only one lived and the other lived caused the slaughter to become more intense as the berserkers' world was continuously dragged out by the hand. Su Ming's previous words were especially true when he said that he did not need flowers that were protected, but trees that would stand tall in the face of wind and rain. Who was the flower and who was the tree? There was no one to witness this battle, and there was no need for anyone to witness it either, because those who lived were trees, and those who died might not be flowers, but they were still eliminated by fate. This was very cruel and unfair, but there was no such thing as fairness in the battlefield. There was no such thing as fairness when a race rose to power. If anyone dared to slack off and not fight, then this sort of berserker was also bound to be eliminated. Besides, it was impossible for anyone to slack off in this battle because this sort of person would not be able to survive until the end. They would be cruelly killed by the other races. The shrill roars came from the other races and berserkers. The temporary warmth in Fong Tsanglan's heart was mostly chased away by the shrill cries. She lifted her head and looked at the area above her, then at her surroundings. A look of pity appeared on her face. When I didn't have their cultivation base, I walked this way. When I have their cultivation base, I still walked this way. I don't expect them to experience life and death like me to reach this step, but if the berserkers had risen to power alone during times of peace, I would have been able to do it with my current level of cultivation. But right now, if I want to make the berserkers rise to power, I will need all the cultivators in the land of berserkers to work together. And what I need them to do is to be able to have the qualifications to survive in the outside world when I'm not around, no matter what calamity comes. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the slaughter happening above him. He saw the berserkers dying, saw them fighting valiantly, saw their bloodshot eyes gradually turning into madness. When they can become aloof when they fight against others, get used to it, and get used to it. Only then will they be considered to have grown. Right now, they are just children in the race. When Su Ming spoke, purple light suddenly shone in his mouth. The end of Will's sword turned into a ray of purple light and flew out to sweep the area above him. Screams of pain reverberated in the air. For outsiders who had just joined the battle and had power equivalent to those in Mastery Realm shuddered simultaneously. Then their heads were separated from their bodies, and they breathed their last. I know what you went through after you left the land of berserkers. Fong Tsanglan stared at Su Ming. There was gentleness in her eyes, but at the same time, there was also pity in them. She grabbed Su Ming's hand and held it. I forgot that you have this kind of ability. Su Ming was momentarily stunned, then let out a bark of laughter. He remembered Fong Tsanglan's ability to see other people's pasts. Su Ming had never seen anyone who had this sort of divine ability outside the land of berserkers. Even among the berserkers, Su Ming had only seen Fong Tsonglan. Perhaps Fong Tsonglan's master was even more skilled in this field. Perhaps there was someone in her line of inheritance who could predict the future. Perhaps. When Su Ming thought of this, his heart suddenly trembled. With a profound look in his eyes, he cast Fong Tsonglan a deep glance. Why was she able to possess vitality in Deathland? Why could she gather together the souls of berserkers after she was asked to become the berserker consort and obtain the respect of berserkers? Besides her personal charm, perhaps there was also some presence in her blood that made the berserkers feel close to her. Why could she and her master's line of inheritance master a divine ability that allowed them to see other people's past in an unfathomable manner, even to the current Su Ming? All of these questions appeared in Su Ming's heart at that moment, and he found a vague answer. When this answer appeared in his mind, the elder who predicted the Berserker's Day, when he returned to the ancient past in the All-Spirits Hall, the Blind Sun Maker, and his elder appeared in Su Ming's mind. The booming sounds from Death Vortex grew stronger, and the battles in the area grew even more devastating. At the same time, the land of berserkers rose higher and higher as it fought against the suction force from the vortex. After a moment, a deafening bang shot up, and the land of berserkers lifted up. At that moment, the exit of the vortex was already within sight. Nearly 200,000 of the 600,000 berserkers had died during the time the land of berserkers moved through the vortex. The remaining ones might have bloodshot eyes, but there was clearly a thick, murderous aura around them. They were no longer mad, but were showing signs of indifference. That indifference was a killing intent that was even stronger than madness after they had gotten used to killing. They were like a piece of steel that was continuously being sharpened to the edge of a sword. Among the 400,000 berserkers, 80,000-something were fated kin. Not many of them died because they were already used to killing. They were already a sharp blade that was about to shine. Yet this slaughter against the outsiders was their first battle after their levels of cultivation increased. It had completely turned the sharp blade that was the fated kin into a treasured sword. The sharpness of that sword could destroy an army of 1,000. It was especially so for Nan Gonghen. His presence had changed drastically during the battle. He stood there like a sharp fong that had been dyed in blood, causing all those who saw him to shudder and feel a chill run down their spines. It was also at that moment that an even stronger roar came from above the land of berserkers. More outsiders swiftly appeared in the vortex above the land of berserkers. The overall strength of these outsiders was not weak, and they were the final barrier to protect the vortex and prevent all those who came out. In fact, Su Ming could even sense a faint presence that belonged to the immortals from these alien races with different appearances. Compared to the fatigue of the 400,000 berserkers, the outsiders who had just appeared were like murderous fiends, as if they had been waiting for a long time. At that moment, when they saw the land of berserkers rising up with a howl and the 400,000 berserkers circling above the land of berserkers and flying up with the berserkers, ferocious and bloodthirsty expressions appeared on the outsiders' faces. They roared towards the sky and charged towards the berserkers like a swarm of bees. There were also several hundreds of thousands of them. This was a battle that could not be considered fair. Even though fairness was as vague as destiny in the process of a race rising to power at that moment, in Su Ming's eyes, if he wanted fairness, then it would definitely be fair. When he saw that the murderous aura from the berserkers had appeared once again and were about to rush out, Su Ming pulled Fong Tsonglan with him and took a step forward. He lifted his left hand and swung it, and a voice that made the berserkers excited reverberated in the air. Let me tell you what fairness is in a race rising to power. At the instant Su Ming spoke, he pushed his left hand against the ground, and, as if he was grabbing something, he swung it swiftly. In an instant, the entire land of berserkers roared. As it did so, the land of berserkers trembled violently. The edges of the land of berserkers looked as if a sea of fire had risen. It was formed due to the extreme speed created by the friction between the vortex and the land of berserkers. From the distance, the entire land of berserkers looked as if it had turned into a gigantic fireball. As the fireball roared, its speed instantly increased by several fold. Due to its speed, the wind pressure that appeared caused all the berserkers to be unable to rise into the air. They landed on the ground and immediately sat down cross-legged to circulate their cultivation bases to counteract the wind pressure. At the same time, all of them lifted their heads and saw the land of berserkers, which had turned into a fireball. In an instant, it swept up all the berserkers and charged towards the exit of Death Vortex. Due to its speed, when it rushed out, it instantly crashed into the hundreds of thousands of outsiders. At the instant they crashed into each other, booming sounds, shrill screams of pain, and indescribable roars erupted from all directions. It was difficult to describe the devastation of the scene. The hundreds of thousands of outsiders were like eggs striking a rock. In an instant, 100,000 of them were destroyed, and in the next instant, 100,000 collapsed, and in the next instant, 100,000 crashed. The violent crash and the fireball that was difficult to fend against took away an endless amount of flesh and blood and destroyed an innumerable amount of souls. It was as if the flames of death were harvesting lives, and they cruelly destroyed everything that stood in their way. In an instant, most of the land of berserkers rushed out of Death Vortex with a bang, causing all the berserkers on it to see the galaxy of the true world for the first time. This is the fairness a race needs when it rises to power. Su Ming's voice echoed in the air faintly and landed in all the berserkers' ears, causing all of them to let out the strongest roar they had ever shouted at a single person in their lives. God of berserkers! God of berserkers! God of berserkers! The presence of the true world filled the area, and the suction force from Death Vortex could no longer continue. No one could stop the berserkers from leaving. It was as if no one could stop this race from rising to power from now on. Wait for me outside with them. I still have some matters to attend to. I need to go back to Death Vortex. Su Ming lowered his head and looked at Fong Tsonglan with a smile, but the moment he said those words, his body suddenly jolted. He lifted his head and stared into space. There was a solemn look on his face that had never appeared before. At that moment, the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe appeared beside Su Ming. He appeared without a single sound, but his words were like thunder that crashed into Su Ming's heart. Your spirit ascension disaster has arrived. Today, I will still write one chapter, and I have been writing all this time. Please forgive me this week. I will definitely make up for it next week. Chapter 1357. Besides the berserkers, Su Ming had also returned to Death Vortex to search for Tion's presence. That was why when he rushed out of Death Vortex, he had told Fong Tsonglan that he wanted to enter Death Vortex again. But before he could finish speaking, a sense of danger came from the true world that clearly belonged to Su Ming. It instantly filled his heart, and the intensity of it made him feel as if he was going to die. In fact, he even felt as if he was certain that he would not survive. The old man's words echoed in space. In truth, before the old man spoke, Su Ming already knew that his antecedental spirit's disaster had arrived. After remaining silent for a moment, Su Ming suddenly smiled in a carefree manner and cast a deep glance at Fong Tsonglan. Bring the berserkers and wait for me beyond Death Vortex. Fong Tsonglan's face turned pale again. This time, it was not because she was not used to the true world's presence, but because she had a vague feeling that something must have happened to Su Ming during that instant just now. That change was not a serendipity, but a life and death disaster. As she stared at Su Ming, Fong Tsonglan embraced him gently in silence. She did not speak, neither did she speak. Everything seemed to be contained in that embrace, and it was silent and endless. When she turned around, Fong Tsonglan left. From the start until the end, she did not ask anything, and neither did she have any feelings for him. Before she turned around, Determination appeared in her eyes. She would not let Su Ming be distracted and would help him lead the berserkers. This was the only thing she could do to help him at that moment. Booming sounds surged into the sky from the land of berserkers. Once they rushed out of Death Vortex, they floated in the galaxy of the true world. This galaxy was Su Ming's clone, and he could change all the presences there in an instant with his divine thought. He stared at the land of berserkers leaving into the distance, at the countless berserkers on the ground bowing towards him, and at Fong Tsanglan, who seemed to be staring at him deeply. The smile on Su Ming's face became even more carefree. The antecedental spirit's disaster. If I can't get through this disaster, even with the help of the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe in my current condition, then perhaps no one in the world can truly get through it. Resolve appeared in Su Ming's eyes. When he turned around, he took a step into Death Vortex. He had chosen Death Vortex not only because he wanted to search for Tion's tracks and the secrets within Death Vortex, but also because of the whispers from the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. This is the aura of the tribulation. You still have 7 days. After 7 days, no matter where you are, the tribulation will descend. I just don't know how it will descend. Return to Death Vortex. If my guess is correct, that place is the most suitable place for you to go through your disaster in Air Triad. The solemn words spoken by the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe appeared in Su Ming's mind. When he turned his head around, he saw the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe beside him. His expression was solemn, but there was also a hint of anticipation on his face. He looked forward to Su Ming's disaster because he wanted to fight against it. If he lost, he would definitely die, but if he won, he would have the right to become the 9th antecedental spirit. It did not matter whether it was for himself or for his people. He had to fight against the antecedental spirit's disaster. 7 days, huh? Then I still have some time to search for Tion. Su Ming stepped into Death Vortex and charged forward. The suction force and aura of death in the vortex did not seem to have much of an effect on him. Once he reached his level of cultivation, unless he ran into some ancient existences, he would not die. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. As he charged forward, he instantly rushed into one of the dimensions in the vortex. It was a vast ocean similar to the Berserker's Dead Sea, but it was not black. Instead, it was blue. At the instant Su Ming stepped into the world, he spread his Atman outwards. When it swept through the area, the hearts of all the people in the expanse cosmos trembled, and without any hesitation, Su Ming turned around and left. Nothing. As Su Ming mumbled, he moved again in Death Vortex and instantly entered another dimension. There was a boundless desert there. The aura of death was so thick that it formed fog, but when Su Ming stepped into it and spread his Atman outwards, the fog swiftly disappeared. There's nothing here either. Su Ming swept his Atman outwards, then turned around and left. Just like that, Su Ming charged through Death Vortex and stepped into all the dimensions before him. Every single time he entered one, he would spread his Atman outwards to check Tion's presence. With Su Ming's Atman as a true world's Atman, as long as he entered the dimension where Tion hid, he was confident that even if he could not find all of them, he would still be able to find some clues. 1 spot, 2 spots. When the first day was over, Su Ming had already searched through more than 1,000 dimensions, but he did not find even a hint of Tion's presence. After all, there were plenty of dimensions in Death Vortex. While 1,000 dimensions might not be a drop in the ocean when compared to the entire Death Vortex, it was still not a lot. If I continue searching like this, even if I use up 7 days, it'll still be difficult for me to search through all of them. After all, there's simply too many dimensions in this place. Su Ming came to a halt in Death Vortex. His eyes sparkled a few times before he suddenly lifted his right hand and struck the center of his brows. With it, Su Ming's body shuddered. His divine sense immediately looked as if it was being split. From 1 to 2, from 2 to 4. When it turned into 10,000 divine senses, they surrounded him and formed another vortex in Death Vortex. 10,000 pieces of divine sense was unimaginable to cultivators, because if their divine sense was split into 10,000 pieces, it would be weakened to the extreme. In fact, it would be impossible for them to do this, and their divine sense would shatter and they would die during the attempt. As for Su Ming, he was an antecedent spirit who possessed true Morning Tao world and had a true world clone, which was why he had the right to split his Atman into 10,000 parts and still ensure that each of them had a certain amount of investigative power. At that moment, a brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. He pushed his hands forward, and the 10,000 divine senses immediately let out a loud bang and charged out. They instantly rushed into the 10,000 dimensions and swiftly swept through the area in search of Tion's tracks. Time passed. The second day, the third day, and the fourth day passed. As Su Ming continued sinking into Death Vortex, his Atman searched batches after batches of 10,000 dimensions each time he went through them. However, Tion's presence was like a drop of water falling into an ocean. 4 days passed, and Su Ming searched through many dimensions, but he did not find even a hint of Tion's presence. In silence, Su Ming continued searching. If he had not been incredibly certain that he had found Tion's presence in this place, he would have given up a long time ago. There are no longer any dimensions below us. When the 5th day arrived, the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe beside Su Ming spoke in a hoarse voice. He cast Su Ming a profound look, then spread his divine sense outwards. Immediately, a whirlwind formed a vortex with him at its center. It swept through the area and swept through all directions. It was a vortex formed by the will of the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe, who had undergone his 8th ascension as an antecedental spirit. It was huge, and when it swept through the area, it looked as if it could replace Death Vortex. As it swelled up, it seemed to overlap with Death Vortex. Once the vortex appeared, the old man's Atman from Heavenly Spirit Tribe instantly fused into each of the dimensions in Death Vortex. When it swept through them, all of Death Vortex looked as if it was trembling. All the living beings in the dimensions instantly sensed the old man's will. Under it, they trembled, were terrified, and even felt despair that they could not fight back. Compared to the 3 great wills killed by Su Ming and the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe, they were like fireflies, and the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe was a bright moon whose light illuminated the entire world. They were life forms on completely different levels. In fact, at that moment, the 8 dimensions in Death Vortex that had originally been sealed off and had all signs of their existence wiped off started trembling under the will of the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. The hearts of the 8 sovereigns and 5 emperors, including Tion, trembled at that instant, but they still did not move. They simply allowed the dimensions in which they were to tremble as if they were about to shatter. Eventually, the space they were in began to crack, and the ground began to crack. The sealed entrance was about to shatter, and a few of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, including Tion, could no longer control themselves. They sent their divine senses out to try to heal the space they were in. Almost at the instant their divine senses appeared, Tion's expression changed. "Hurry up and retrieve your divine senses." Tion's warning was still a little too late. Almost at the instant the divine senses tried to repair the dimensions, the will of the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe swiftly moved away from all the dimensions and descended on the 8 dimensions where the 3 sovereigns, 5 emperors, and 7 sovereigns were. However, he did not sweep through them in a domineering manner. Instead, once he descended, he quickly left. Once the old man's will left, the dimension where the 8 people were was filled with dead silence. Including Tion, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors remained silent with dark expressions on their faces. From a moment the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe spread his divine sense outwards to the moment it ended. Only the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn had passed. As the old man retracted his divine sense, the booming sounds gradually disappeared, and the vortex formed by his will also disappeared. 8 dimensions sealed from the inside. The method used to seal them is the same as in Death Vortex. There are 8 people in them. Their bodies have already stiffened, and their wills have become even stronger. They are not weak. Your antecedent spirit disaster has descended. I suggest that you ignore these 8 people, no matter what sort of grudge they have against you. The old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe said slowly while looking at Su Ming. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever. He met the old man's gaze. The antecedent spirit's disaster is about to arrive. I naturally know what I'm doing. I'm looking for one of the 8 because I'm worried that he will suddenly appear and interfere with my disaster. Since they have sealed off the dimensions where they are and do not want anyone to find them, to ensure that no accidents happen, please help them. Seal off the dimensions where they are and everything will be fine. Su Ming's voice was calm. He could tell that the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe did not want to participate in this matter, which was why he spoke faintly. A glint appeared in the old man's eyes. Without any hesitation, he lifted his right hand and swung it at in Death Vortex above him. Immediately, 8 runic symbols appeared on his palm. They contained the brand of his will, and they instantly fused into the vortex before landing on the 8 sealed entrances to the dimensions. They were sealed firmly. Chapter 1358. While Su Ming used the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe to completely seal the dimension where the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were, the countless berserkers in the land of berserkers floated in the galaxy beyond in Death Vortex and stared at the rotating in Death Vortex in silence. This was the first time they left in Death Vortex, and the first time they came to the world outside. At that moment, all sorts of emotions rose in their hearts, especially since their god of berserkers was still inside. It was inevitable that anxiety would appear on their faces. After going through the devastating battle just now, the berserkers felt as if they had been reborn from the ashes. Their presence had changed, and even though they were silent at that moment, a hint of determination appeared in their eyes. It was a determination that if Su Ming did not come out, they would never leave. In fact, they would not hesitate to return to in Death Vortex. They might have possessed this presence in the past, but it had never been as resolute as it was then. Sometimes, the word resolute represented a presence that could not be hidden away. Fong Tsang Lan sat quietly on a mountain at the edge of the land. She stared at the vast in Death Vortex under the galaxy with a shaky gaze. In Death Vortex was like a dazzling vortex of stars. If it was not because the aura of death was indistinct, it would definitely give off a beautiful and dazzling feeling. She was waiting, just like how it had been for 1,000 years. No matter how much time had passed, she would continue to wait. However, fate seemed to be too attached to her. For more than 1,000 years, he was outside, and she was inside. Yet now, she had come out, but he was left in Death Vortex. At that moment, the current 9th summit in what was once Morning Dao sect was being fortified. It did not matter whether it was the protective runes or the fusion of the 3 forces of power within it. All of them were swiftly changing 9th Summit's appearance. It was changing with each passing day, causing the 9th Summit, which had once been Morning Dao sect, to become stronger in an unseen manner. The army from True Sacredine World and the 4th True World moved through the borders. Under the invitation of the envoys sent by the 9th Summit, they tore through the whirlwind and charged towards the area near Arid Triad's Gap with the 100,000 cultivators sent by the 9th Summit. It would be the first line of defense for Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos to fight against Dark Dawn and Saint Defire. It would also be the first army. All of True Morning Dao World was in a state of nervousness. Time trickled by slowly. Compared to them, the tense atmosphere at that moment was the silence before storm. No one knew when Saint Defire and Dark Dawn would descend through Arid Triad's Gap. However, some of the more qualified cultivators understood that that day was very, very close. It was so close that perhaps it would be tomorrow. The circular area of 1 million feet beyond Arid Triad's Gap was still filled with thick whirlwinds. There might still be whirlwinds at the periphery, but they had become much thinner. This was due to the cultivators from the three great true worlds working together. They had stationed themselves in three directions nearby and formed three camps that were connected together. Runes, seals, powerful weapons, and other items filled the area. All of them were locked down on Eritread's Gap. Usually, quite a large number of cultivators from the three great camps would be sent to rush into the whirlwinds near the gap as scouts to observe the situation closely. The cultivators of Ninth Summit were the main targets for this mission, because while the fourth true world and true serene world might be able to withstand the whirlwind, they could not do so like the cultivators of Ninth Summit. Since Su Ming was the master of the entire true world's will, all those who had his brand on them, and in fact, it could be said that all the cultivators who had gathered the laws of fate for Su Ming could move through a large area in the whirlwind without being affected. In fact, as long as Su Ming wanted to, he could make the whirlwinds instantly disappear, but he did not want to do so. The existence of the whirlwinds was better for Eritread. After all, it was a natural defense. The tension in true morning Tao world and the silence before a storm formed an oppressive atmosphere. At the same time, it enveloped the entire true world. True serene world and the fourth true world were also preparing for the second wave of cultivators to be sent out. This was a war in which all of them would live or die together. This was not an internal conflict. If this was a civil war, then regardless of who won or lost, whether they lived or died, the final result would only decide which side would be the overlord. Right then, the war was an invasion by foreign enemies. It was an invasion. If they lost, then the four great true worlds would be enslaved, countless cultivators would be killed, and Eritread would have a new master. In the eyes of true serene world and the fourth true world, the Ninth Summit, which had risen to power once more in true morning Tao world, did not have the right to become the master of true morning Tao world. In fact, many people from the two great true worlds believed that since true morning Tao world had already been reduced to ruins, there was no longer any need for it to exist. It would be better to turn it into a battlefield and turn all of true morning Tao world into a dangerous zone. In fact, this sort of opinion had once been supported by many powerful warriors from the two great true worlds. However, the sublime paragon from true serene world and a certain ancient will from the fourth true world had rejected all of this. Not only did they treat the envoys from the Ninth Summit politely, they were also incredibly polite to the Ninth Summit. This matter caused many cultivators to be puzzled. Gradually, a rumor spread out for some unknown reason. It said that behind true morning Tao world's Ninth Summit was a powerful warrior who was like a sublime paragon from the four great true worlds in Eritread. It was precisely this person's existence that allowed the Ninth Summit to obtain the respect of the other two great true worlds. This rumor was vague. Some people believed in it, and some scoffed at it. However, no matter what, the alliance between the three great true worlds to attack and defend against foreign enemies could descend at any moment became incredibly sturdy. At that moment, Su Ming, the powerful warrior who was rumored to be like a sublime paragon behind the Ninth Summit, was in death vortex. His expression was aloof, and there was determination in his eyes. He charged into the depths of death vortex. Ring-shaped ripples spread out around Su Ming and formed the protective power of the ring. That power filled the area around Su Ming, allowing him to maintain a certain speed even though he was in the depths of death vortex. He was incredibly fast. When the sixth day was almost over, he had already reached a depth he had never gone down before. Death vortex around him became narrower, and the suction force became stronger. Piercing howls that sounded like wolf howls rang in his ears, and they were deafening. I'll go a little deeper. I can sense an unimaginable existence in the depths of death vortex. There was a hint of excitement in the words of the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. As he spoke, he grabbed Su Ming and rushed forward. However, at the instant he rushed forward with Su Ming, a powerful repelling force appeared in the vortex and turned into wind. That wind might seem weak, but when it swept past, it seemed to freeze the vortex, causing death vortex to freeze for a moment before stirring up a windstorm that made even the pupils of the old man from heavenly spirit tribe shrink. The windstorm appeared suddenly, but Su Ming was in a slightly better state. He only felt his entire body become numb, as if he had lost his cultivation base for an instant. His mind became blank and his body froze. However, the old man from heavenly spirit tribe shuddered and retreated swiftly. He coughed up 3 mouthfuls of blood in succession. Shock appeared on his face, but soon he threw his head back and laughed loudly. I knew it. I knew it. My guess was right. It's impossible for eternal life to exist in the world. All lives have their mortal enemies, and all existences must die. Su Ming, head deeper into this place. Head to the deepest part. The secret hidden there is related to you. Madness appeared on the old man's face. As he laughed, he turned around and lifted his head to look at the endless death vortex above him. Almost at the instant he finished speaking, the 7th day arrived. The arrival of the 7th day meant that Su Ming's antecedent spirit's disaster had arrived. A blood mark immediately appeared at the center of Su Ming's brows. It swiftly melted into blood threads, and in the blink of an eye, they covered Su Ming's entire body, as if they had wrapped him in a net of blood. Beyond death vortex was the other side of the land of berserkers floating in the galaxy. It was a galaxy that could almost be seen from the land of berserkers through death vortex, and at that moment, there were 2 figures standing quietly. The 2 figures were very indistinct, as if they did not exist. No one knew how long they had been there, but they had been staring at death vortex quietly. One of them was short, but he was not a dwarf. Instead, he was a boy. The other seemed to be surrounded by fog. Every single rotation of the fog seemed to have turned into an eye, causing anyone who looked at him to feel as if there were countless eyes on him. Not a single hint of aura spread out from the 2 of them. By standing there, they seemed to be able to avoid certain laws and wills in the true world. After a long while, the boy sighed softly. Can you tell this person's level of cultivation? Forget me. There are only a handful of people in arid triad expanse cosmos who can possess a person from true morning Tao world, the figure covered in fog said in a low voice. There are rumors in the world outside that this person is a sublime paragon, just like you and me, but they don't know that this person has long since surpassed sublime paragons and is above us. I just don't understand. All the antecedental spirits were suppressed in the 4th true world. So how did he become an antecedental spirit? These 2 people were the sublime paragons of true sacredine world and the 4th true world. If Su Ming could split his attention to look at the boy, he would definitely be able to recognize him at first glance. This person was Chong He's master in the illusion he saw on Chong He's skeleton. Only the figure in fog could tell based on his understanding of the antecedental spirits that since he could become the 4th true world's sublime paragon, he knew too many secrets regarding the antecedental spirits in arid triad being suppressed. The figure covered in fog was silent for a moment before he said hoarsely, "Don't forget the legendary All Spirits Hall." All spirits. Just as the boy was about to speak, he suddenly lifted his head and his pupils shrank. He saw the entire true world go through a change that shocked even him. At the same time, his aura swelled up swiftly, as if it had been stimulated by a powerful force. This is antecedental. Spirits. Disaster. The person who answered him was the figure in fog beside him. That person had been speaking in halts, and there was disbelief in his voice. When he said the last word, he cried out in surprise. Chapter 1359. The figure in the fog only had time to say the words antecedental spirits disaster. At the instant he said it, his body froze, and after that, the world swiftly fell silent. Space did not move, as if all manner of things were eternal, as if all lives had died. Even the powerful and mysterious sublime paragon in the 4th true world was forced to extinguish all signs of life under the indescribable will of heaven. This was not death, but but a stillness that existed between life and death. It was as if all the existences in the universe did not dare to live under the descent of the will of heaven, and neither were they allowed to die. That was why they could only choose to become a temporary blank and serve as a foil to the will of heaven's descent. It did not matter whether they were willing or not. Next to him, the boy's face was filled with disbelief and astonishment. Astonishment like that was something that was rarely seen on him, and yet, not only did it appear on his face, it was frozen in place, transforming into an expression that would last for all eternity. That was because his body had gone completely still. Only the terror in his eyes and the reflection reflected in his pupils could allow others to see the true scene he and the entire universe had seen before it froze. What was reflected in his pupils was the whirlwind that would occasionally exist in true morning Tao world stopping in space. Even all the laws in the true world seemed to have been sealed in an invisible ice, and they became eternal in an instant. Everything became still. It was the same for the land of berserkers beside Death Vortex. All the berserkers' blood flowed in their veins, their hearts beat, their cultivation bases, and all their thoughts turned into unmoving silence at that instant. All the people, including Fong Tsang Lan, turned into statues and were frozen in space. Their expressions remained the same. In fact, even they themselves did not know that their lives had come to a halt. It was not just the people in the land. It could be said that all the lives and existences in true morning Tao world, no matter what level of cultivation they had, no matter where they were, no matter what they were doing, no matter whether they were alive or not, all of them fell silent as the laws froze. The will of an individual, the will of a powerful warrior, and even the will of a race were so insignificant before the will of heaven that they could not muster up any strength to struggle. No matter what the 1 million cultivators were doing in the Ninth Summit, even if they were in what was once Morning Tao sect, it was still difficult for them to avoid the entire world coming to a standstill. All of them stopped moving at that instant. Eldest senior brother, second senior brother, Guzi, and everyone else did the same. The first line of defense against the foreign races from true Sacredine world, the fourth true world, and the ninth summit beyond arid Triad's gap. The 300,000 cultivators, the dozens of people who were constantly observing the gap in the whirlwind, and even the piercing, whistling whirlwind that seemed as if it would never stop, all of them froze at that instant. It was as if this world had become an eternal painting. There were 2 cultivators from the ninth summit beside arid Triad's gap. The remaining shock remained on their faces, as if they had discovered some sort of military information that they had to immediately report. They stared at arid Triad's gap and looked as if they wanted to retreat, but they did not move. At that moment, there were 8 people at arid Triad's gap. There was a grim and ghastly look on their faces, and they were walking over from outside. However, at the instant they stepped into arid Triad, they froze. Through arid Triad's gap, it could be seen that there were countless cultivators from Saint D Fire and Dark Dawn within it, but their expressions changed. In shock, they instantly stopped moving, not daring to take even a single step forward. However, their bodies did not stop moving. As long as they stepped into arid Triad, they would definitely remain there for eternity. 2 indistinct figures appeared in the galaxy beyond arid Triad's gap. They each represented one of the highest wills from Saint D Fire and Dark Dawn. Based on the 2 figures, it could be seen that they were a man and a woman. The woman represented Saint D Fire, and the man represented Dark Dawn. At that moment, their bodies seemed to be formed by fog, and they were swiftly dispersing. Their faces could not be seen clearly, but based on the grave look in their eyes, it could be seen that their hearts were definitely not calm at that moment. This is the antecedental spirit's disaster. Someone is going through the antecedental spirit's disaster in arid Triad expanse cosmos. The 2 of them were silent for a moment. When they spoke hoarsely, they cast each other a glance. They might be enemies, but they had already reached a consensus regarding arid Triad expanse cosmos, which was why at that moment they could see caution and a hint of regard in each other's eyes. Stop moving forward. Once this person gets through his disaster, We will enter arid triad. The man was silent for a moment before he sighed softly. When he said those words, the endless number of cultivators behind him immediately took 3 steps back. Besides true morning Tao world, true sacredine world, the emperor of abyss true world, and the 4th true world also froze in arid triad expanse cosmos. It could be said that all the regions in arid triad expanse cosmos had frozen at that instant. They were as calm as water, and not a single ripple could be seen. Only death vortex became the only existence in all of arid triad expanse cosmos that had not been frozen. The vortex was still rotating, as if it was not affected by arid triad expanse cosmos. It was as if the antecedental spirit's disaster, which was enough to make all existences apprehensive and force Saint Fire and Dark Dawn to temporarily avoid its might, could not affect its operation. The other worlds in Death Vortex were also in the same state. While everything in the world outside was still, they were able to move about as they usually did. It was as if all the changes in the world outside were separated by 2 expanse cosmoses to those in Death Vortex. Su Ming's pupil shrank. He lifted his head and stared at the area above the vortex. Not too far away, the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe's eyes burned brightly. He had been waiting for this day for a very, very long time, and it had finally arrived. An increasingly powerful presence gathered on the old man's body. It was like a sharp sword that was about to be drawn out of its scabbard, and at that moment, there was a hint of it wanting to cut down the sky. In fact, another vortex appeared around him. It swept outwards, and with his will contained within it, it became the 2nd whirlwind in Death Vortex. An indescribable, brilliant light shone in his eyes. It was like the strongest light in the world, and it could burn all lives who met his gaze. At that moment, a loud bang reverberated through all of true Morning Tao world. It spread out and reverberated through all 4 true worlds in Arid Triad. At the instant it spoke, a crimson bolt of lightning that was only as thick as a normal person's arm gathered in the space beyond Death Vortex. When it appeared, the space was immediately illuminated in a blood-red shade, as if it had turned into a sea of blood and hell. If anyone looked over, they would find that everything was crimson. That light spread through all of true Morning Tao world. It filled true Sacredine world, the Emperor of Abyss true world, and the mysterious 4th true world. Even the barren lands of divine essence was covered by the crimson light during that instant. Right when the bolt of lightning gathered together, it turned into a red light. With an indescribable presence, it swept up all of Arid Triad and turned it into a bolt of lightning that charged into Death Vortex. During its descent, the light that filled all of Arid Triad instantly moved in reverse and shrank. In the end, it gathered together, causing the bolt of lightning to turn into the extreme shade of red in the world. The bolt of lightning instantly rushed into the vortex. It shuddered, but at the same time, the red bolt of lightning also shuddered violently. Its color instantly became slightly duller, but it still charged forward and let out shocking booms. It shot through the fog in Death Vortex with an unstoppable force and charged towards Su Ming, who was in the depths of the vortex. It was as if it was a bolt of lightning that chased after Su Ming. Once it locked down on him, no matter where he hid, it would definitely descend. It would not stop until it wiped out his life force. Su Ming had used 7 days to reach the depths of Death Vortex, but the bolt of lightning had instantly appeared before his eyes. The bolt of lightning was crimson, and there was a domineering and destructive madness that seemed to represent Arid Triad's strongest will. It was like the blood capillaries in the eyes of a deranged person. At the instant Su Ming saw the bolt of lightning, it stirred up a deafening roar and instantly closed in on him. Each of the 7 disasters of the antecedental spirits is stronger than the last. As the old man's ancient voice echoed in the air, he took a step forward, but at the instant he lifted his foot, a ferocious look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. This was his antecedental spirit's disaster. If the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe had to fight against all of it, Su Ming would not be willing to do so. He wanted to try going through his disaster himself. Only by doing so would he be able to have a firm, well, no matter what sort of dangers he ran into in the future. Unless he could not get through it and needed someone else's help, otherwise he would personally face the disaster. This is a disaster, but also a serendipity. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. I will deal with the first disaster myself. As Su Ming spoke, he moved swiftly. The third eye at the center of his brow opened, and the red bolt of lightning that was closing in on him was magnified by 100 times, 1,000 times, or even more. He lifted his right hand, formed a seal, and struck the third eye at the center of his brow. At the same time, he covered the third eye. The will of the true world and the will of an antecedental spirit erupted from Su Ming's body. Even though the true world had come to a standstill outside, when Su Ming was there, he was the true world and the master of true Morning Tao's will. Mountain Shifter! Su Ming swung his arm and lifted his arms. Once he pressed his palms together, he thrust them toward the top of his head. Immediately, 100,000 mountains appeared around him. They manifested at the same time and instantly gathered on Su Ming. They overlapped with each other and turned into a towering mountain that crashed into the descending red bolt of lightning with a loud bang. From the distance, it did not look like the bolt of lightning had descended with a great force. Instead, it looked like Su Ming had taken the initiative to attack. At the instant the bolt of lightning crashed into the mountain, Su Ming shuddered. The towering mountain formed by the 100,000 mountains around him shuddered violently at that moment. Under the loud bang, it continuously crumbled, and in an instant it was torn to pieces. The red bolt of lightning became slightly dimmer, but its speed remained the same. Its killing intent was astonishing, and it charged towards the center of Su Ming's brow. Chapter 1360. A profound look appeared in the eyes of the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. He stared at Su Ming and did not immediately save him. If Su Ming did not choose to personally go through the disaster, he would naturally help him. But in his heart, he would definitely come to the conclusion that Su Ming's achievements would stop there. A person who did not even dare to face his antecedental spirit's disaster would not be able to become an outstanding person in his life. In the end, he would only end up among the masses. Not only would his level of cultivation not increase, he would even slowly scatter. That was why the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe could tell that Su Ming was a man of great responsibility when he asked to personally go through the disaster. This sort of person was also very curious as to how many disasters he could get through. Due to my existence, his disaster will definitely be different from other people's. Just the first disaster alone has already surpassed what I once understood. And if this wasn't an death vortex, the power of this disaster would have been even more terrifying. The old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe frowned and looked at Su Ming, who was swiftly closing in on him by the red bolt of lightning. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. In the face of the powerful antecedental spirit's disaster, it would be difficult for his mountain shifter art to fight against it. This was something Su Ming had predicted before, which was why when the 100,000 mountains crumbled and the red bolt of lightning closed in on him, he formed a seal with his hands and struck his chest. With it, Su Ming took a few swift steps back. When he opened his mouth, purple light shone, and the end of Will's sword charged out. Purple light instantly reached 100,000 feet and enveloped the entire area around Su Ming. It was a piercing light, and from the distance, Su Ming looked as if he had turned into a huge purple sword in death vortex. End of Will's mountain shifter. A large amount of red appeared in Su Ming's eyes at that instant. He circulated all his cultivation base madly in his body to activate the end of Will's sword. With the power of the sword, he shook the universe, connected it to his true world, and stirred up millions of mountains to execute the strongest mountain shifter art. The shape of a sword and the shape of a mountain had something in common during ancient times. In the hands of humans, Willow branches, wood, gold, silver, and iron could all be turned into swords. In the hands of heaven, mountains on the ground, and huge trees could all be turned into swords. That was why he used his sword to stir up Mountain Shifter. This was the method Su Ming had thought of to make his Mountain Shifter divine ability stronger. At that moment, he executed it without any hesitation. His will of an antecedental spirit spread out of Death Vortex and filled Arid Triad's true Morning Tao world, which had already been frozen. As Su Ming's will spread out, the countless broken cultivation planets that once existed in true Morning Tao world, the floating continents, and the shattered mountains buzzed and trembled, as if their souls had been extracted. After Su Ming extracted all the mountain souls from true Morning Tao world, they instantly appeared around him in Death Vortex. 100,000, 1 million, 10 million. When there were more than 100 million of them, they did not surround him, or else the vortex would not be able to contain them. The mountain souls overlapped with each other, with Su Ming as the center and the tip of the end of Will's sword in front of him as the tip of the mountain. They swiftly manifested and overlapped with each other. In the blink of an eye, they turned into 300 million mountains. Once the 300 million mountains overlapped with each other, they contained the supreme sharpness of the end of Will's sword and the vast, indestructible nature of the mountain souls of Morning Tao world. They surrounded Su Ming and turned into a purple mountain. When the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe saw this scene, his pupils shrank slightly. He had repeatedly seen miraculous things about Su Ming. It did not matter whether it was when he was in the world in the All Spirits Hall, when he wandered about the world outside, or when he fought against the antecedental spirits disaster. All of them rose in the old man's mind. This child is skilled in concealing his arts, such as this divine ability right now. It's much stronger than the ones he executed previously. It can be said that he's not moving at all, but when he does, it will be astonishing. When the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe saw Su Ming turn into the Purple Mountain, he sighed in relief in his heart, because he knew that Su Ming had not recklessly said that he wanted to experience the antecedental spirit's disaster. Instead, he had come to a decision a long time ago and made preparations for it. It's a pity. If he was one of my people, the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe shook his head. He could not hide the envy he felt towards great Berserker Tribe on his face. When the old man shook his head, the mountain that was Su Ming moved like a sharp sword in Death Vortex. It might have seemed to have taken a long time, but in truth, all of it happened in an instant. At the instant the red bolt of lightning closed in, it descended on the Purple Mountain. Loud booming sounds echoed endlessly in the area. The red bolt of lightning was the first disaster of the antecedental spirit's disaster. It was also the weakest disaster among the other 6 disasters. After being suppressed by Death Vortex and being weakened by Su Ming's first Mountain Shifter art, it crashed into the end of Will's Mountain Shifter art Su Ming had prepared with all his might. At the instant the booming sounds reverberated in the air, the Purple Mountain that was Su Ming shuddered violently. Cracking sounds rose and fell, and cracks swiftly appeared. Rays of red light spread out from the cracks. They were the power of the red bolt of lightning. It was like a force that was spreading out and pouring out. Once Su Ming used the mountain to fight against it, he used the cracks to weaken its power. When a deafening boom surged into the sky, the Purple Mountain that was Su Ming shattered to pieces. The mountain formed by 300 million mountain souls crumbled completely, and purple light shone from within. It was the end of Will's sword. With the killing intent that had been gathering for a long time, it swiftly charged towards the red bolt of lightning that had descended on Su Ming. A piercing sound of friction echoed in the air. It was the sound of the end of Will's sword crashing into the red bolt of lightning. It only lasted for about 2 breaths before a brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. For the first time, he rushed out and charged towards the red bolt of lightning. This was Su Ming's chain divine abilities. The first was Mountain Shifter, the second was End of Will's Mountain Shifter, and the third was End of Will's Mountain Shifter. With this method, Su Ming continuously weakened the red bolt of lightning before he attacked. He used the simplest method and the simplest punch. When the end of Will's sword retreated, he threw a punch straight at the incredibly dull red bolt of lightning. Booming sounds spread in all directions. Su Ming shuddered, but he did not move back. Instead, he lifted his head, and a presence that made him look down on the entire world appeared around him. That presence became stronger, and in the end, when the red bolt of lightning in front of him was destroyed by the first disaster of the antecedent spirit, Su Ming's presence reached its strongest state. The old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe in the distance witnessed all of this, and praise appeared in his eyes. It did not matter what method Su Ming had used. He had indeed fought against the disaster of the antecedent spirit on his own. This might not be able to increase his level of cultivation, but in his heart and his will, it allowed Su Ming to improve by leaps and bounds, as if he had taken a huge step forward. Antecedent spirits have 7 disasters. Even though I was the one who guided your disaster, I believe that at most, there will only be 3 disasters. After all, you've only had your spirit ascend once. I can help you get through the 3 disasters. If you want to go through the disaster on your own, I will also take action when appropriate. After all, I want to prove my theory. So now, what do you want to do with the second disaster? The old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe asked while looking at Su Ming. I will go through the second disaster on my own. Su Ming remained silent for a few breaths before he wrapped his fist in his palm towards the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. At that moment, his aura was like a tidal wave, and he could not let it leak out, which was why no matter how strong the second disaster was, he had to persevere. And, more importantly, Su Ming could clearly sense that as his aura continued gathering together, he felt as if he was about to reach a breakthrough. This breakthrough came from a state of being and the will of the antecedent spirit in him. When he was in the world in All Spirits Hall, he had only had his spirit ascend once, not because he did not know the number for his second spirit ascension, but because Su Ming had a feeling that he could not do it in time. If he forced his spirit ascend, even if the number was correct, he might not be able to succeed. It was just like how a mortal would feel when they lifted a stone that was about 10 feet tall and looked at a stone that was 100 feet tall. They would have the will to do it, but the strength to do so would be insufficient. Yet now, once Su Ming got through the first disaster, he had a strong feeling that as long as he reached a breakthrough, he would be able to have his second spirit ascend as an immortal. 9 spirit ascensions. Su Ming's heart let out a loud thump, but he did not show a single hint of it on his face. When he lifted his head, he stared at the vortex, and a hint of fighting spirit appeared in his eyes. Hidden beneath, it was anticipation that only he knew. Very well. Based on what I know, the second disaster is the 5 lightning disaster. This disaster, the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe nodded. Just as he was about to speak, thunder suddenly roared above Death Vortex. At the instant the sound appeared, the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe saw 5 colors shining in the vortex above him. This scene caused his heart to tremble. A brilliant light shone in his eyes, and he focused his attention on it. This is when the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe saw the 5-colored light clearly. His expression changed, and a hint of shock appeared on his face. At the same time, in the dead, silent, arid triad expanse cosmos beyond Death Vortex, 4 bolts of lightning gathered together out of nowhere from 4 directions. They turned into long arcs that charged towards Death Vortex. They were so fast that cultivators could not hope to compare to them. Moving through an expanse cosmos only took an instant. The 4 long arcs had 4 colors that intersected with each other and changed continuously. There was black, white, red, and pink. As they changed, they instantly closed in on Death Vortex. Immediately after, the 5th long arc appeared in the galaxy beyond Death Vortex. It was yellow, and it seemed to represent a supreme, awe-inspiring, and extremely noble yellow. It was like the imperial power in the mortal world. Light covered the entire area, and the other 4 colors surrounded the area, but they did not cluster around each other. Instead, as if they were arranged according to some sort of order, they charged towards Death Vortex. Booming sounds reverberated in the air. The 5 long arcs rushed into the vortex and instantly appeared before Su Ming's eyes. It was also at that moment that he heard the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe mumbling in disbelief. 5-colored lightning. It's actually 5-colored lightning. It's late for the update. Why get home tomorrow? It's finally over. This week has been so painful. I'll continue writing and see whether I have time to write another chapter. Chapter 1361. The 5-colored lightning was a lightning with 5 colors. However, the 5 ordinary colors were not worthy of being called colors. Only the 5 long arcs that appeared before Su Ming and the old man's eyes were the colors that were said to be given to all lives when they were born in the universe. They were the colors that were fused with life and some profound theories. The black color was not completely black. Perhaps more accurately speaking, in the beginning, it was a color that was close to faint brown. It was the color of child. The red color contained gentleness, youth, and age. It did not describe women, but all men and women in their prime. When people looked at it, they would be willing to immerse themselves in it. It was the color of a woman. The pink color contained temptation, charm, and all the most primitive desires in the universe. It could light up a person's soul and make them unable to help themselves from being immersed in it. It was also not used to describe women either. Instead, it was used to express the maturity and charm of a person who had passed the age of a woman's beauty. It was the color of pink. The white was not the white of snow, but an ancient air. It was like white hair, and when people looked at it, they would feel as if they saw their own old appearance many years later. They would naturally sigh and lament over the changes of time. When they noticed it, they would already be in their twilight years. It was the color of crane. As for the yellow long arc, it was supreme, as if it stood at the peak of all lives and was looking down on the land. It was a nobility that could not be described with words. It was the symbol of the imperial power of an overlord in the mortal world. It was the light of a leader that all living beings needed. It was the color of a dragon. It was the 5-colored lightning. The color of a child, the color of a woman, the color of pink, the color of a dragon, and the color of a crane. It encompassed all lives and gave them 5 different colors. At that moment, as the 5 long arcs descended, they changed at the instant they closed in on Su Ming. They turned into faces that charged towards him and closed in on him. The first to get close was the color of a child. When he closed in, Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He lifted his right hand and cut the air in front of him. He knew just how terrifying the antecedental spirit's disaster was. When he attacked, he used his full strength. The Godslayer art appeared swiftly and turned into an arc in front of Su Ming. Like a long blade, it charged towards the color of a child. The power of absolute accuracy and rebound erupted the instant it crashed into the lightning with the child's face. Su Ming retreated without any hesitation, and his eyes shone brightly. He might have attacked with his full strength, but due to the difference in divine abilities, the strength of his attacks were naturally different. He had only used that art to test the strength of that lightning. Su Ming would execute different divine abilities to deal with different results, but he did not expect that the instant the long blade formed by the slash art touched the lightning with the child's face, the lightning shuddered and crumbled. Su Ming was momentarily stunned. At the same time, the red-faced lightning and the pink face charged towards him. Behind them were a large number of faces formed by the dragon and crane faces, and they were all closing in on him. Su Ming immediately took a few steps back. Just as he was about to attack, his heart suddenly trembled. He felt as if some sort of change had happened to his body. This change was incredibly bizarre, and it was especially concentrated on his face. He felt as if his appearance had changed, and the world before his eyes seemed to have become smaller. A feeling of weakness rose in his heart against his will. The old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe stared at Su Ming. He could clearly see Su Ming's appearance. At that moment, he had turned into a boy, and he was going through a rapid metamorphosis. When he turned into a newborn baby, anguish appeared on the old man's face. This is the five-colored lightning. When the universe was born and all lives were created, they were given a fair set of 5 colors. This is everything from the moment a life is born to the moment it returns to dust. Shatter them and experience the 5 colors. Only then will the disaster truly appear. When the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe spoke, Su Ming noticed that his appearance had changed drastically, but the feeling of weakness in his body did not cause him to be alarmed. Instead, a brilliant light shone in his eyes. He could sense that the signs of a breakthrough were becoming more and more intense as his appearance changed. A resolute look shone in Su Ming's eyes. With a single move, he took a step forward without any hesitation. In the face of the incoming red-faced lightning, he threw a punch at it through the air. With a loud bang, the red-faced lightning crumbled, and even the pink-faced lightning behind it shattered as if it could not withstand a single blow. Su Ming's appearance changed again. From a newborn, he turned into a teenager, then into a man at the prime of his life. Then, Su Ming landed a punch on the dragon's face. When the dragon's face lightning shattered, Su Ming's appearance changed again. This time, he was middle-aged, but he exuded an awe-inspiring presence, as if he was an incredibly noble existence. It was also at that moment that Su Ming sensed that he was about to reach a breakthrough. It reached its peak, and with just one more step, he would reach a breakthrough. With desire and determination, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pushed at the air in the direction of the final crane face. Boom! The crane's face lightning instantly crumbled. At the instant it did so, Su Ming threw his head back and roared. His presence remained the same, but he could sense a metamorphosis erupting violently in his will. As that feeling of eruption continued, the 5-colored lightning that had crumbled and dissipated suddenly gathered together once more. They gathered together so quickly that they took form in the blink of an eye. What appeared was not lightning, but faces, but only 5 faces. Each 5-colored lightning would only turn into one face. All 5 of those faces belonged to Su Ming. They were Su Ming's newborn, teenager, young man, middle-aged man, and old man. They surrounded each other and formed a huge hand that swiftly went to seize Su Ming. A strong sense of danger rose in Su Ming's heart. That danger came from the hand. The astonishing presence spreading out from the hand formed by the 5 colors far surpassed that of the previous red bolt of lightning. The hand's speed was endless. It seemed as if it only stretched out once, but it already covered the area around Su Ming and locked down all his directions. It covered the sky and enveloped him like a cage. Its presence roared, and it clenched its fist to seize Su Ming. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. Almost at the instant the hand sealed off all his escape routes and was about to seize him, Su Ming closed his eyes. Once he did so, a large amount of black light immediately surged out of his body. It was the light of extreme darkness. Surrounded by the light of extreme darkness, Su Ming looked as if he was covered in black spikes, and he allowed the hand to seize him. Muffled booming sounds reverberated in the air. The instant the hand seized Su Ming, it came to an abrupt halt, and a large amount of black light spilled out from the gaps between its fingers. There was also a dragon's roar coming from within the hand. I can only write up to this point. I'll have to wake up early tomorrow and go to bed first. A new week. Ahem, please give me recommendation votes. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.